Chapter 2731. Mrs. Gowan was flabbergasted. Her face stiffened as she stood there for a long while. Only then did she carefully size up the young crown princess. Her mind was clear, her eyes were bright, and there were no symptoms of the hallucinogenic fragrance. How could this be? That was her newly developed hallucinogenic fragrance with indescribable effects. But, she asked the crown princess to come closer to smell it, and the crown princess was quite cooperative. After smelling it for a long time, there was really no reaction at all. What was going on? Could it be that she had mixed the fragrance incorrectly? Mrs. Gowan was about to go closer to smell it when she heard the young crown princess say impatiently, "Okay, it's your turn to smell it." She didn't seem to have mixed any fragrances, but with a light flick of her sleeve, a very faint fragrance blended into her breath. Mrs. Gowan's expression changed slightly, and she quickly and secretly blocked her five senses. She couldn't help but feel a little proud. After all, the crown princess was young, and didn't know how to be flexible. As long as she sealed her five senses, wouldn't she be able to completely block out that fragrance? Strange, her head felt a little dizzy. Mrs. Gowan instantly felt that something was wrong. She heard the young crown princess say coldly, "It's useless even if you seal your five senses." Her poisonous fog, as long as it came into contact with a person's skin, it would be pervasive. Hallucinogenic, huh? Arbor smiled coldly. This woman who was indulging in the wildest fantasies actually wanted to humiliate her in front of everyone. Where exactly did she get the confidence to think that Lord Xiao Xiao would fall for such a low-level trick like hers? Arbor sneered at Mrs. Gowan, then returned to her seat with a flick of her sleeve. Seeing her return, Prince Emo reached out to hold her little hand and asked curiously, "What's in that smoke?" Because at this moment, Mrs. Gowan's face was already abnormally red. Looking at her dazed expression, it was a little painful to the eyes. "Hallucinatory," Arbor snorted and said with a look of disgust. "Give her a hazy and hallucinatory dream." However, looking at her lecherous smile, he knew what kind of dream this was. Madame Gowan had already started her performance. First, she let out a short whimper, followed by the madam falling to the ground in front of everyone. Her wrist trembled slightly as she unbuttoned her gown, and an indescribable sound came out of her mouth. Everyone looked in shock at the extraordinary performance of the madam of the National Security Agency in the center of the hall. They couldn't believe their eyes. The old censors' faces turned red. They flicked their sleeves and scolded angrily. "What an eyesore! Preposterous! Hurry up and pull her up. Rude, rude." The great emperor sat on his throne. His eyelids had been twitching nonstop since just now. Seeing Madame Gua's current state, he hurriedly ordered Hu Duquan beside him, "Get someone to send her back to her residence." Madame Gowan let out an infatuated chuckle. At this time, she had completely sunk into that hallucinatory dream. Sitting in the Qin family's seat, fifth young Master Qin's hair stood on end as he looked at this wanton woman. He felt a stifling feeling in his chest, and he wanted to find a place to spit it out. "Mommy, what exactly is she dreaming of? Her expression is so disgusting." Qi Xianxian rubbed the goosebumps on her arms and couldn't help but shudder, revealing a disgusted expression. Chapter 2732. It must be a wet dream. Sitting next to her, Mata couldn't help but smile vulgarly. Qi Xianxian turned to glare at him. "Shameless. Hey, how am I the shameless one?" Mata rubbed his chin and muttered, "It's this madam who's shameless." That shameless madam wasn't wearing 2 layers of clothing to begin with. Now that her gown was taken off, half of her fragrant shoulder was revealed. Not only did she mutter, she even started to touch herself. The extent of her actions was simply unbearable to watch. "Young Sir Zither, don't go," Madame Gowan murmured. Everyone could clearly hear the words "young Sir Zither," and their expressions instantly changed unpredictably. The faces of the Qin family members present all darkened. Fifth young Sir Zither even glared fiercely in young crown princess's direction. Arbor was expressionless. Sir Jojo only gave her a fantastical dream, to let her dream of what she wanted the most. As for what she dreamed of, how she would behave, and how much she would protrude, that wasn't something that Sir Jojo could control. All right? Why was he glaring at her? Prince Emo couldn't help but shudder, and leaned closer to his wifey. Sensing his aura nearing, the young crown princess subconsciously rubbed the back of his hand and said in all seriousness, "Don't be afraid, I will protect you." Prince Imo couldn't help but be caught between laughter and tears. Currently, everyone present was actually rather curious about what wet dream Madame Gowan was having. Judging from her licentious appearance, it seemed like she wasn't just messing around with one young Sir Zither. No wonder the expressions of the young Sir Zithers became increasingly dark. Pthahahaha. Very abruptly, a young Sir's laughter attracted everyone's attention. Prince Imo whispered in his wifey's ear, "Long family member." Arbor looked coldly at that young Sir Zither. This person was the second son of Patriarch Long Shoshin Long Chong. That day in Arbor's despondent pavilion, he had actually seen him when he blew up the silk pants Sir Jean Bao and the others into the sky. It was just that when she glanced at people, she would rarely deliberately remember a few cats and dogs. So naturally, she had no impression of Long Chong at this moment. The crown prince of Jianpain, Imo Kuan, looked at Long Chong in astonishment. He thought that after that day at the frustrated pavilion, these guys would at least have some brains, but it seemed that they didn't. There were so many people present. Which one of them wasn't secretly laughing? Only Long Chong actually laughed out loud. "Can't you see that the great emperor's expression is extremely ugly?" Sure enough, in the next second, the great emperor's gaze swept coldly towards Long Chong. In any case, this madam of the Ministry of State Security was the empress's elder sister in name. Making a fool of herself in front of the empress was really not a dignified matter. "Hurry up and send my wife back to her residence," the great emperor said coldly. Hu Dequan broke out in a cold sweat. He hurriedly ordered 2 palace maids to go forward and pull the woman who was lying on the ground. "Ah-hee-hee." The woman continuously laughed in a manner that made one's hair stand on end. The 2 palace maids braced themselves and came forward with red faces to pull her. This madam couldn't resist giggling. She grabbed one of the palace maids with one hand and repeatedly rubbed her body against the other, muttering Chin Lang, as she moved to take off that palace maid's clothes. The Qin estate's patriarch Qin Hong's expression was frighteningly unsightly. Although eldest young Sir Qin and young Sir Omega Katoka's expressions were also unsightly, they weren't like 5th Qin, who seemed to be trembling all over. Chapter 2733. 5th young Master Qin simply wanted to scream out loud. He was too afraid of hearing his name from Madame Gowan's mouth. This made him feel like he wouldn't be able to live on any longer. Seeing his younger brother in such a bad state, the eldest young master promptly reached out to grab him. "Xiao, do you want to go back first?" How could 5th young Master Qin dare to budge? If he walked out now, what if that crazy woman hugged him halfway? His handsome face was as pale as snow, and his hands on his knees involuntarily started trembling slightly. Arbor glanced at that 5th young master and abruptly jumped up, stomping back to Madame Gowan's side. That woman was currently crazily tugging at a royal maid's clothes, pushing that trembling royal maid to the ground, and stepping on her. This action was simply unbearable to look at. She was thinking that the royal maid was a certain Zither young master, and pushed her down. Oh, looking at her actions, it seemed like she didn't just push down one Zither young master. Everyone's expressions were somewhat thought-provoking as they circled around the 3 Zither young masters. It couldn't be some kind of activity, right? The old imperial censors were so angry that their faces turned white, and they kept muttering, "Shameless! Shameless! Deranged! Simply lacking in etiquette." At this time, the young crown princess had already run in front of Madame Gowan. Just as everyone was condemning her, they saw the little fellow nimbly slash down at Madame Gowan's neck with a blade in one hand. Madame Gowan's head immediately tilted, and all of her movements came to a screeching halt. She fell on that royal maid, firmly pressing her down. "Ah!" That royal maid cried out involuntarily, her face pale from fright. Her clothes had already been completely disfigured by Madame Gowan, and she covered her face in shame as she sobbed. Arbor kicked Madame Gowan to the side without any hesitation. She took out an outer robe from her inner world and draped it over that disheveled royal maid, pulling her up. That royal maid cried as she saluted her gratefully. Clutching the outer robe draped over her body, She hastily retreated. Deranged. The young crown princess angrily rebuked. Everyone. The great emperor's lips twitched as he resisted the urge to beat up a child. The corners of everyone's eyes twitched visibly. The little crown princess said expressionlessly, "I won." The great emperor couldn't help but raise his hand to support his forehead. He waved his hand weakly and said, "Send madam back to her residence. Send madam back to her residence." Hu Duquan hurriedly called for a few stronger guards to come in and lift up the national security madam, whose clothes were almost completely stripped, revealing a large part of her snow-white body, and hurriedly left the main hall. For a moment, the atmosphere fell silent. Everyone held their breaths, not even daring to breathe. He felt that His Majesty was probably not in a good mood right now. Hu Duquan quivered and rushed to the front of the little crown princess. He bowed respectfully and said, "Yes, crown princess." The great emperor felt his teeth ache. When his personal eunuch saw the little crown princess, he was like a mouse that saw a cat. He was extremely obedient. "Let's split the money we won. If they don't have enough spirit coins, let them sign the debt receipt." "Yes." Hu Duquan wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and hurriedly ran to settle the bet. In this grand gamble, His Highness the Crown Prince had bet 50 million spirit coins, and now he had netted back more than 100 million. Chapter 2734. This is truly insane, everyone thought to themselves. Thus, the lords who had bet on Madame Gua's victory all cried to the heavens and wiped away their tears as they watched the salary that they had scrimped and saved for several years all be squeezed dry by the Crown Princess side. The funniest one was the Duke of Giampain. He should have joined in the crying and wiping away tears as well. However, the Duke of Giampain's heir added 20 million at the last moment. Not only did the father and son not lose anything, but they also inexplicably earned 20 million after deducting their capital. The Duke of Giampain finally found his son much more pleasing to the eye. He rubbed his son's dog head and nodded with rare affection. "You did well." The one who suffered the most was probably the second miss of the Zhongli residence, Zhongli Jiwei. After Madame Gua's 90 million bet, the second miss of the Zhongli family had bet 60 million, but it had all gone down the drain. The Long family members couldn't laugh at this moment either. They had bet quite a bit as well, 30 million spirit coins. They had thought that they would be able to earn some back, but now they had lost all of it. It was simply infuriating. Long Chong frowned and suddenly stood up to call out loudly, "Everyone, is this the end of the competition?" Everyone looked at him, as if they were looking at an idiot. What else could they do other than end it? Madame Gua had already been carried off the stage. What else could they do? Our bet just now was to smell the fragrance and dispel it, right? Was it incense that the Crown Princess sprayed on Madame Gua? Why does it look like fog when I look at it? It looks like poisonous fog. Long Chong's words woke everyone up from their dreams. Long Shoshin, the head of the Long family, quickly jumped up and called out, "That's right, that's right. What the Crown Princess gave Madame Gua wasn't incense at all. Why don't you smell it?" Arbor raised his little hand. The group of Long family members immediately took a step back and stared at her warily. What a joke. Madame Goen was at the 12th level of the spirit realm at the very least. Add to that the fact that she usually smelled and distinguished fragrances. She was very familiar with fragrances. If even she could fall for the young Crown Prince Consort's trick like this, there was no need to mention them. "Crown Princess, please be careful." Patriarch Long's face darkened as he bellowed. Long Chong giggled at the young Crown Prince Consort. "Heh, cousin, we're all one family. Why do you have to go so overboard?" When Long Chong said this, everyone remembered. Wasn't she his cousin? The little Crown Princess's mother, Long Chuyen, was also a member of the Long family. Arbor sneered and looked at Long Chong. "Do you know where the fool who called me cousin last time is now?" Her voice was icy cold, and her gaze was as sharp as a blade, stabbing over with a swoosh. Seeing this, Patriarch Long couldn't help but be stunned. He subconsciously reached out to grab his son's wrist and pulled him back. "What are you doing?" Long Shoshin angrily rebuked. Boom! Xiao Mu kicked over, directly sending the short table in front of him flying into the air and charging straight for Long Chong's chest. Long Shoshin had been on guard against her at the time. Now that he saw that she had indeed acted so mercilessly, his eyelids twitched involuntarily. He hurriedly grabbed his son and dodged. Bam! The overturned short table hit the ground with a dull thud. Patriarch Long was so angry that his face was a bit green. He grabbed his son and said angrily, "Crown Princess, what are you doing? You don't understand?" The little Crown Princess summoned the Black Pharaoh from her inner world with a whoosh. "Teaching you a lesson." Chapter 2735. Her eyes were sharp, and her expression was cold. Her gaze toward the Long family did not contain the slightest bit of warmth. It did not seem like she was looking at her cousins at all. It was more like she was looking at her enemies. Mu Jingfeng opened his mouth, but he could not help but shut it. Mu Xingqian hurriedly stood up and walked over. Seeing this, Mu Roxuan hurriedly followed. Her eyes were filled with mockery as she said, "Big brother, did you see that? She's like a lunatic, attacking others just like that." The Long family's Long Chang merely called her cousin. Is there a need for her to flip out like this? Even if she looks down on the Long family, she shouldn't indiscriminately attack others like this. Mu Roxuan sneered. She dares to be so rude in front of His Majesty in the main hall. If this isn't a breach of etiquette, then what is? Don't spout nonsense if you don't know. Mu Xingqian turned around and glared at Mu Roxuan. His Qiao Qiao wouldn't get angry for no reason. He naturally did not know what these Long family members had done in the past. But now he knew. As members of the Long family, they actually colluded with outsiders to attack their own family for some benefits. Such people with such low morals and improper conduct actually had the face to claim kinship with the Crown Princess. What was the point of not beating them? Should they be left for the new year? The Long family is extremely shameless, Mu Xingqian said coldly. Beating them up is their honor. Mu Roxuan looked at her elder brother, walking in front of her in surprise. She kept thinking in her heart, Big brother has never said such harsh words before. This was all because one was influenced by the company one kept. Being so close to that sarcastic young Crown Prince Consort, her eldest brother had also learned bad things from her. Arbor slammed his ferrule down on Long Chang's head. With his father's help, Long Chang dodged in a sorry state. She frowned and raised her hand to throw out 2 8 trigrams binding talismans. Bind! A circle of light in the shape of the 8 trigrams enveloped Long Chang. Within a few breaths, Long Chang was bound on the spot. The little Crown Princess expressionlessly released a bow and ordered indifferently, "Break one of his dog legs. Let everyone in the Long family remember not to claim kinship in the future. I'm beautiful and gentle. Shut up and get to work." The little Crown Princess was speechless as she interrupted the mechanical puppet's long-winded praises. She waved her hand and asked it to quickly drag the eyesore Long Chang out. "All right." De Bao raised his head and blocked the Long family members who came forward to stop him with 2 punches. Grabbing the terrified Long Chang, the golem exerted its strength and directly carried Long Chang out of the palace. Everyone was dumbfounded. Long Shoshin was so angry that he extended a finger and pointed at the little Crown Princess with a trembling finger. Worried about his son's safety, he didn't dare to stay here. He quickly bowed to the great emperor and ran out with the Long family to save Long Chang. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly returned to their seats. The sky outside was already completely dark. This palace banquet had already been held for more than 4 hours. The funny thing was they didn't even eat much. They were only there to bet and watch the show. The great emperor stared at his son speechlessly. The latter had a baffled expression as he lowered his head to look at himself. He was wearing a black formal suit that was slim-fitting and fitted. There was nothing wrong with it. The great emperor held his breath in his chest. Look at this bandit wife you married. What did she do to a good banquet? His son immediately glared back at him. Chapter 2736. Can you blame my wife for this? Can you blame her? Prince Emo glared at his father. Was she the one who wanted to compete in that competition? Was she the one who humiliated the National Security Agency? Was she the one who instigated those ministers to bet on the National Security Agency's victory? Was she the one who deliberately targeted the Long family? Not at all. It was all these people who came up and asked for it. The emperor was so angry that his eyes hurt. He didn't want to look at his son anymore. This brat only knew how to help his wife. He hadn't even reprimanded him. He only glared at him a few times. And he immediately wanted to protect his wife and glare back. He couldn't bear to look at him. The crown prince held his wife's hand and sat peacefully at the side, revealing an innocent expression that said, "What did we do?" The emperor's anger was stuck in his chest. He couldn't scold or let it go. He couldn't help but secretly grind his teeth. "All right, serve the dishes." After so long, not all the dishes were served. It was better to let them eat and scram. The ministers had lost a lot of money and were feeling the pinch in their hearts. When they heard the emperor's words, they all swore in their hearts that they would definitely eat it back. But they had lost so much money. Could they eat it back? Left Prime Minister Chen Chaoji was about to cry. He had invested 10 million spirit coins. His family's income for several years was gone, and he had even thrown in his salary for so many years. The tigress beside him secretly pinched his arms, twisting them until they were bruised. This was still at the palace banquet. The tigress couldn't flare up. When they returned home, there would definitely be chaos for a while. There would be no peace at home. If he had known, he would have learned from the calm Gao Baran. Even if he had invested in the little crown princess, he hadn't invested too much money. Regardless of whether they lost or not, they would still be able to live the rest of their lives, right? It was all his fault. No, it was that madam of the National Security Agency. She said that she was invincible, but in the end, she was useless. In an instant, she was defeated by the crown princess. Chen Chaoji's heart was bleeding. He didn't know how to live the rest of his life. He only felt very lost. Madame Chen, who was beside him, was already pouting. She had been glaring at Chen Chaoji with narrowed eyes. Just now, she had already said not to invest so much, but this man kept comforting her, saying that Mrs. Guo would definitely win. And the result. Madame Chen felt like she was about to go crazy. Her savings for the past few years had all been squandered by this man in one night. Chen Baojiao was naturally in a bad mood. Seeing the little crown princess in the limelight, it would be strange if she felt better. Moreover, her parents were quarreling, so she didn't dare to say anything. She could only sit there gloomily. Like the Chen family, there were many officials who had fooled themselves because of their blind trust in the madam of the National Security Agency. He really couldn't go on living in the future. The madam of the National Security Agency had tricked all the civil and military officials of the imperial court. Everyone's mood was in turmoil, and they all wanted to cry. On the other hand, Imperial Censor Wang, Imperial Censor Jiang, and the others were beaming with happiness. It was a pity that he had blindly trusted the crown prince. He felt that it was impossible for the black-hearted couple to lose. As expected, ha 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 ha. The few censors who had made a small profit were very shamelessly happy in their hearts. However, on the surface, they still looked very serious. The emperor coughed and raised his cup first. "My son and daughter-in-law have just returned to the capital. In the future, I will need everyone's support." Chapter 2737. Since the emperor had already said so, the various lords and family heads also hurriedly cried silently, expressing that they would definitely get along well with the black-hearted couple, smiling on the surface but crying on the inside. This was the truest portrayal of the hearts of the various lords and patrician families. "I heard that eldest Miss Mu received an invitation letter from the Imperial Academy." A voice rang out with a laugh. Everyone turned to look at the source of the voice, and saw that it was Gu family's family head, Gu Daochang, who had always been on good terms with the Mu family. "My son Gu Yishuan just happened to receive an invitation letter as well. Why don't he travel together with eldest Miss Mu?" Family head Gu said with a smile. Mu Roshuan clearly felt honored that family head Gu had specifically mentioned the invitation letter, and she smiled faintly at family head Gu. Her gaze then turned to the man behind family head Gu, who had a long face and slightly narrowed eyes. She smiled and said, "Roshuan would be more than happy to travel with Sir Yishuan." Ha ha ha. Family head Do also laughed. "Our Do family also has 4 juniors who are going to participate in the test. Why don't they all go together? It'll be more lively." Mu Jingfeng's face, which was originally smiling, instantly stiffened. Their Mu family only had one Mu Rochuan going to the Imperial Academy, but the Dou family actually had 4. He wouldn't know if he didn't compare, but once he did, his heart ached. Then Yongqian, you can go with them. Family head Shi also chimed in. Sure, Yongqian promptly shook her head. I'll go with Miss Qin. The Qin family had even more people going than the Dou family. When the time came, Qinwen would definitely go with Sir Omega Kotoku and the rest. Then, she would naturally be in the same team as Sir Omega Kotoku. Sure, Yongqian made a small calculation and looked up at Miss Qin with a fawning smile. Qinwen didn't comment. She didn't care. Who didn't know about Sure Yongqian's little thoughts? The entire capital knew that she wholeheartedly adored her second brother. Everyone cheerfully talked about their juniors going to the Imperial Academy to participate in the test, but they had already forgotten some of the unpleasant matters from before. Suddenly, a discordant voice cut through the joyous laughter of the crowd. It was a bit shrill as it said, "Didn't the Crown Princess also return to the Mu family? Could it be that the Crown Princess did not receive an invitation from the royal school?" Everyone's eyes were focused on Zhongli Mansion's second miss, Zhongli Jiwei. Was there an end to this? After finally stopping for a few minutes, Miss Zhongli's flames of war were about to burn the Crown Princess again. Everyone felt a headache coming on. From the looks of it, that Crown Princess wasn't someone who was willing to suffer a loss. Why didn't she know her place? Why did she have to poke at others for no reason? The little fatty glanced at Miss Zhongli, put down his chopsticks and snorted. What's so great about the Royal Academy? Our Jojo doesn't need to go to the academy to study. That's right, our Jojo doesn't know anything. Why do you insist on going to school to study? What a joke. Qi Xianxian put down her chopsticks and looked at Miss Zhongli impolitely. Who are you? Are you looking for trouble? Cough, this is Great General Zhongli's second miss, Zhongli Jiwei. A madam at the side tried to smooth things over and couldn't help but advise. Miss Zhongli, she is also a straightforward person. She says whatever she thinks. If she has offended the Crown Princess, please forgive her. Let's just eat. Why are there so many problems? Chapter 2738. Mata poked at the dishes on her plate and glanced indifferently at Miss Zhongli. What are you showing off for? Do you want to compete with us? I think it's lively enough today. If Miss Zhongli wants to compete, our Seacombe Planet Battle team will accept the challenge. All the officials instantly acted in unison and hurriedly reached out their chopsticks to pick up a few dishes and put them into their mouths to chew. Some even picked up their favorite dishes. Afraid that they wouldn't be able to eat the dishes if the commotion started again, Emilienne glanced at them and silently twitched her mouth. Thinking about it, these officials were also quite miserable. Not only did they lose several years' worth of salary in the time it took to eat a meal, they might not even be able to eat a few mouthfuls of food now. Zhongli Jiwei looked at Qi Xianxian and the others with a dark expression, unable to restrain the anger in her heart. Those people weren't even born and raised in the divine continent, yet they dared to be so impudent in front of her, the miss of General Zhongli's estate? Wasn't it all because the Crown Princess gave them the guts? If it weren't for this Crown Princess obstructing them, with her identity as the second miss of the Zhongli estate, she might have already entered the Crown Prince estate. Why would she still need to endure their attitude here? Thinking of this, Zhongli Jiwei's expression became even more gloomy. Jiwei, why aren't you apologizing to the Crown Princess yet? A dignified woman beside Zhongli Jiwei smiled and said, You're too insensible, child. This woman was General Zhongli's second wife, Zhongli Jiwei's biological mother, Madame Ma. She stood up and bowed in the direction of the young Crown Princess. Smiling, she said, Jiwei has offended you, and I hope that the Crown Princess will forgive her. As for what she offended, Madame Zhongli didn't say. Anyway, everyone was well aware. Wasn't it because second Miss Zhongli's outstanding talent that she received an invitation from the Royal Academy, while the young Crown Princess, as a daughter of the Mu family, didn't receive an invitation? Madame Zhongli wanted to apologize, because she was afraid that the young Crown Princess would fly into a rage out of humiliation and vent her anger on her daughter Jiwei. Everyone cursed in their hearts and secretly glanced at the little Crown Princess. He couldn't help but be speechless. The crown princess's stoic face didn't reveal any emotions. She sat there like a jade carving, watching their performance, as if she was watching a clown. That look in her eyes was filled with disdain. It was hard for anyone not to notice it. The great emperor frowned and said coldly, "Enough, let's not talk about other things. I want to make an announcement." Zhongli Jiwei secretly gritted her teeth. Her heart was filled with doubts. Wasn't it said that the emperor hadn't acknowledged the identity of the little crown princess? Why did it feel like the emperor was protecting this damned crown prince consort in every way? This was really strange. The crown prince and the crown princess have always held their wedding ceremonies in the lower star field. The great emperor looked at his subjects expressionlessly and said, "I have decided to hold another wedding for them. Let's set it for today, 3 months from now." Chen Baojia, Zhongli Jiwei, and the other girls felt dizzy and didn't know what was going on. What? The great emperor actually decreed that he would personally hold their wedding ceremony. That means he acknowledged the identity of the crown princess? Chen Baojia almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Her entire person was a little dizzy. Even His Majesty acknowledged the identity of the crown princess. Then what about her? Chen Baojia was flustered. She really wanted to ask the madam of the National Security Agency. Chapter 2739. But when she looked up, Minister of State Security was not there. She thought about it carefully. Wasn't Minister of State Security knocked out by the crown princess and carried away? Chen Baojia was anxious, angry, and uncomfortable. She was on the verge of collapse. She was muddle-headed and very uncomfortable. On the other side, Zhongli Jiwei was not much better than her. If she could, she really wanted to stand up and ask His Majesty why he made such a decision. Originally, in the entire Great Divine Province, except for the imperial capital, very few people knew that their crown prince brought the little crown princess back to the capital. If the wedding ceremony was held and announced to the world, then what should she do? What should she do? Madame Zhongli looked worriedly at her daughter sitting beside her. She quickly reached out and held Zhongli Jiwei's hand. She couldn't help but secretly hate the madam of the National Security Agency, who couldn't do anything right. If Madam of State Security had not repeatedly mentioned how good the Crown Prince was, and how many benefits there were to enter the Crown Prince's residence, how could her daughter be like this now? She had only seen the Crown Prince a few times, and yet she was so dead set on that man. Mrs. Zhongli was so angry that she gritted her teeth. She had completely forgotten that she had followed Madam of State Security and encouraged her daughter to do everything she could to capture the Crown Prince's heart. Chen Chaoji stood up and bowed. "Isn't the wedding ceremony a bit too hasty, Your Majesty?" As soon as he said this, everyone immediately realized that the Emperor and the Crown Prince's faces darkened at the same time. They were really in sync. "Are you questioning my decision?" the Emperor asked coldly. An oppressive aura pressed down on Chen Chaoji. Minister's face immediately turned gray. He quickly cupped his hands and said, "Well, after all, the Elder Council still hasn't said anything." When Ministers mentioned the Elder Council, the Emperor's face became slightly better. Ministers Chen Chaoji was slightly relieved. He quickly said, "Your Majesty, the Elder Council had decided to let the Crown Prince marry Princess Jing Linyao of the Panga clan. Princess Jing is brave and smart, and her cultivation level is very high. She is a rare female cultivator, who is a level 14 great spiritual master." The more Chen Chaoji spoke, the smoother he became. Princess Jing might have to undergo the 5 spirits reincarnation test in the next few years. Also, the Panga clan has such a marvelous item. It will not be a problem for Princess Jing to pass the tribulation. That's right, Your Majesty. After all, as everyone knows, female cultivators only have a 1% chance of surviving the 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation. It's rare to see a woman as intelligent and resourceful as Princess Jing. General Zhongli stroked his short black beard and nodded as well, speaking in a matter-of-fact tone. Zhongli Jiwei was quite proud of herself. She looked at the little crown princess provocatively. Without the approval of the Elder Council, even if the Emperor wanted to arrange a marriage between you and the Crown Prince, he would have to consider whether the Elder Council's decision could be approved. Lord State Preceptor, You are experienced and knowledgeable. What do you think? The state preceptor, who had not spoken since the beginning, was suddenly affected by the flames of war. He was not surprised. He just calmly looked at Chen Xiaoji, who had dragged him into the water. The state preceptor nodded slightly. According to the past practice, the crown prince's marriage must be approved by the elder council. At least half of the elder council's members must approve. Right now there were 7 elders in the elder council. Chapter 2740. Except for the chief elder who is always wandering outside, the other 6 elders are naturally here. Invite them over, and make a decision immediately. It's not a big problem, Chen Xiaoji said with certainty. Chen Baojia's mood finally improved a little at this time. Thinking of what her father said to her before, she suddenly had a few smiles on her face. The decision of the Council of Elders would definitely not pass. As long as the Council of Elders' decision was not passed, the little crown princess would not be able to officially become the crown princess of the divine land. As for Jing Linyao, before the crown prince came back, they had already asked Jing Linyao for her opinion. Jing Linyao did not have the slightest intention to oppose the crown prince taking a concubine, and it seemed that she did not care about men at all. This was good. After the marriage in the future, the worse the relationship between Jing Linyao, the crown princess, and the crown prince, the more opportunities Chen Baojia could take advantage of. It was just that Zhongli Jiwei was very annoying. With the power of the general's mansion, they would definitely arrange for her to marry into the mansion. But Chen Baojia was confident that with Zhongli Jiwei's IQ, she would definitely be left behind a few streets behind. Lord Jojo did not know at all that in the hearts of the people present, there were surging winds and clouds that were surging like a storm. Even if she knew, according to her idea, it was enough to slap her to death with strength. There was no need to talk nonsense. She coldly looked at the people jumping up and down, and did not say a word. Mo Lusheng was a little angry. He thought that Chen Xiaoji was really getting bolder and bolder. Now he was actually using the Council of Elders to suppress him? Did he think that he cared about the existence of the Council of Elders? Looking at the fierce eyes of the great emperor, everyone did not dare to breathe loudly, and silently lowered their heads. All the officials, including Chen Xiaoji, felt a strong pressure from the great emperor from top to bottom. Everyone felt that the great emperor was not what they thought. The great emperor casually said that he would hold a wedding ceremony for the crown prince and crown princess. The great emperor was serious. I have made up my mind. The great emperor coldly spat out 4 words. Suddenly, a little eunuch outside the door hurriedly reported, 4th elder, 5th elder, 6th elder, and 7th elder request to see your majesty. Good. This Chen Xiaoji was indeed bold. He actually had such a trick up his sleeve, and was waiting for him here. He didn't know when his courtier had gotten so close to the elders' guild. At this time, Chen Xiaoji was also secretly wiping his sweat, and cursing in his heart. He wasn't the one who invited the elders over. Although he had mentioned this to the 4th elder in advance, how could he arrange for all the elders of the divine land to suddenly appear here at the same time? Moreover, he didn't know that the great emperor would suddenly mention the wedding banquet tonight. How could he have the time to prepare? Therefore, it must have been arranged by someone else. This person's methods were exceedingly powerful. However, now that this person with extraordinary means was hiding behind the scenes, Chen Xiaoji would have to take the blame. Chen Xiaoji felt even more uneasy when he saw the great emperor's piercing gaze. He wondered if the great emperor would take this opportunity to remove him from his position. Chen Xiaoji's body trembled. He quickly thought that this was impossible. Although the great emperor was violent, he was usually more reasonable. After all, he was the left prime minister Chen Xiaoji. If the great emperor wanted to remove him from his position, he would have to consider the consequences. Prince Imo coldly curled the corner of his mouth. He held the little girl's little hand, and gently squeezed it. Chapter 2741. The crown prince's fingers were slender, and his palm was dry and warm. The message he conveyed was, Jojo, don't worry. Jojo didn't care at all. He looked at everyone present coldly, as if he was watching a clown show. Of course she was at ease. She wasn't worried at all about what would happen next. The little guy had blind confidence in Prince Mo. In any case, her husband could settle everything. As they spoke, the 4 green-robed elders entered the hall at the same time and bowed to the great emperor on the throne. "Greetings, Your Majesty. Greetings, Your Majesty." The great emperor nodded slightly with a heavy expression. "Elders, why have you come together?" 4th elder walked out first and said indifferently, "We heard that the great emperor has decided to reorganize the wedding banquet for the crown prince and the Mu family's young lady." The great emperor couldn't help but laugh. These people's sources of information were quite fast. He looked at Chen Chaoji coldly. Chen Chaoji was about to break out in a cold sweat. It was a great injustice. Thinking about it, it was obvious that he couldn't have used a special method to inform the elders. The Elders Guild has passed a resolution. We don't agree with the Crown Prince marrying Miss Mu. As they spoke, a slightly short elder suddenly jumped out and waved his hand. No, I don't disagree. 5th elder. The 4th elder glared at him in exasperation. 5th elder pursed his lips. Then I don't disagree. 4th elder ignored him and said directly to the great emperor. In short, 6th elder, 7th elder. And I don't agree with the Crown Prince marrying Miss Mu. What's the use of you not agreeing? Arbor said coldly. His words made everyone's jaws drop. Hey miss, this is the Elders Guild. Do you have to be so arrogant? You can be considered the first person who dares to speak in such a manner in front of the elders of the Council of Elders. Didn't you see that even the great emperor was quite respectful to the elders? This crown prince has already married the crown princess. Mo Lien said indifferently. I'll marry her even if you don't agree. That's it. The great emperor didn't say anything. He just looked at the elders coldly. Usually when he was being insulted, he always felt that his lungs were about to explode from anger because of this pair of brats. Now that he saw someone being insulted by the young couple, he felt an inexplicable sense of pleasure. Was it appropriate to rejoice in others' misfortune? The 4th elder's face darkened. He cupped his hands and said to the great emperor, Your Majesty, there have been rules since ancient times. The Council of Elders of the Divine Land has the right to decide on the Crown Prince's wife. This is also for the future development of the Great Divine Land. Mu Jingfeng could not help but ask coldly, Why? Did our Mu family's ladies make you feel wronged? Mu Rochuan couldn't help but be stunned. She looked up at her father. This was the first time she saw her father standing beside the little crown princess and speaking up for her. This is probably for the sake of the family's interests, Mu Rochuan thought. Mu Rochuan wasn't the only one who thought so. The little crown princess herself also thought so. Would Mu Jingfeng be so kind as to help her? Wasn't it because she was the Mu family's daughter now? If she was slapped in the face by the Council of Elders, their Mu family would feel bad about it. Family head Mu, you've misunderstood. Mu Xingchen sneered. Misunderstood? Then why do you keep saying that you don't agree? My sister's marriage isn't up to you to decide. Chapter 2742. 4th Elder glanced at Mu Xingchen with an ugly expression. This matter needs to be considered at length. Whether Miss Mu can become the crown princess of our divine prefecture still needs to be tested by the Council of Elders. Zhongli Jiwei almost laughed out loud. Another test. Being the crown prince's imperial concubine was truly sullen. Her mocking gaze landed on the little crown princess's face. The latter was expressionless as she looked at them coldly. This isn't a test for any Tom, Dick, or Harry. This crown princess has to accept it. The emperor's mouth twitched. He suddenly felt that the little crown princess was somewhat pleasing to the eye. Because he was the brat's father, the crown princess tolerated him and was willing to accept his test. As for others, the little crown princess did not give them any face at all. Crown Prince Emo glanced at his old dad smugly. Now you know how good my wife is. And how much my wife respected you back then, right? Don't make trouble for yourself. You don't know how lucky you are. The emperor was speechless. What's with the look in my son's eyes? Is it appropriate for him to look at me like he's warning me not to make trouble? What a brat! Crown Prince Emo faintly swept him a glance before retracting his gaze. 4th Elder was so angry that his nose was crooked. This girl actually dared to say that the Council of Elders is a Tom, Dick, or Harry. She really has guts. Even if the 7 elders don't agree, my wife will only be Jojo alone. Emolien said coldly, do you think that you can order me around and do whatever you want with just the few of you? A terrifying aura surged from his body, and a heavy pressure rushed towards the elders. Did he, Emolien, need their consent to marry anyone? What a joke! Their opinions were not important to him at all. 7th elder's face darkened, but he could not help but be pleasantly surprised. The crown prince's aura had far surpassed the divine realm. Could it be that he had advanced to mystique venerable rank? A mystique venerable rank in his early 20s? Was he trying to scare people to death? With such extraordinary potential, how could he find a pitiful 3rd-level spirit realm cultivator as his wife? No, they were not worthy at all. Only someone as stunning as Princess Jing would be a good match for the crown prince. Other than the 5th elder, who had a look of disapproval, the other 3 elders became even more determined. Your Highness, please reconsider. You came here rashly and spouted nonsense? Have you asked for 2nd elder and 3rd elder's opinion? Emolien sneered. Ever since the chief elder disappeared, the entire affairs of the Elders Guild were managed by the 2nd elder and the 3rd elder. In other words, these 2 were the representatives of the Elders' Council. The 4th elder was taken aback. 2nd elder and 3rd elder are still in closed-door training these days. This prince has already informed them. Wait a moment. Prince Emo coldly said. The 4th elder and the others couldn't help but be stunned again. The 5th elder hurriedly tried to smooth things over. Aya, let's talk things over. Don't make things so tense, okay? The elders are only thinking of His Highness. And His Highness is also very protective of his wife. Neither side has done anything wrong. Let's talk things over. Let's talk things over. The 4th elder glared at the coward who had shrunk back at the last moment. Scram. The 5th elder rubbed his nose. The atmosphere in the hall froze. Zhongli Jiwei, who had wanted to mock the young crown princess, did not dare to say anything. Chapter 2743. His Majesty did not seem to be in a good mood. If she mocked the crown prince consort now, it might coincidentally trigger His Majesty's anger. She didn't want to get into trouble. Moreover, at this time, she could just watch the Elders Guild scold the crown princess. She didn't need to stand up for herself. Zhongli Jiwei was proud and looked at Chen Baojia. However, Chen Baojia was a little worried. Her father had offended His Majesty just now. She didn't know if he would be punished later. The whole hall fell into silence. Other than the sound of people drinking and eating, there was no other sound. Flutter, flutter, a slight sound of wings flapping came from outside the hall. It was already 10 o'clock in the morning. The banquet had been going on since the evening. Poor people, they hadn't eaten much. Trouble seemed to be coming one after another. Hearing the sound, everyone's hair stood up and they turned to look. Could it be that something else had happened? Suddenly, a mechanical wooden bird flapped its wings and flew in from outside the hall. It glided over everyone's heads with a pure gold invitation letter, stamped with a circular seal in its beak. It's an invitation letter. Mu Rochuan exclaimed. The other young people who had received invitations also couldn't help but exclaim. Why was the invitation letter sent to the palace? Was it to invite the crown prince? Everyone's gazes all turned towards Crown Prince Mo. Some were in admiration, some were in awe, but even more were full of reverence. The crown prince of the divine province was extraordinary. He had just returned, and he had already received an invitation letter from the royal school. The crown prince suddenly turned his head and looked at his little wife. He had a feeling that there was a 99% chance that this invitation was directed at his Jojo. The mechanical wooden bird flapped its wings and accurately flew to the table in front of the crown prince. With a puff, it spat out the 8 invitation letters in its mouth in front of the crown prince. Then its mouth opened and closed, and a magnetic male voice came out. Hello, I'm the principal of the royal school Yin Piaomiao. Arbor Qi Xianxian, Duanmu Qing, Ko Hongwen Mata, Lu Yu Jiang Xiaoxin Huatao. Congratulations to these 8 students. Welcome to the royal school's entrance exam this spring. Please bring this invitation letter to the Wind Thunder City on the 15th of March of this year. At that time, someone will guide you on how to take the test. Everyone was dumbfounded. Qi Xianxian and the others also stood up in a daze and looked suspiciously at the mechanical wooden bird squatting in front of Arbor. What happened? Why were they suddenly asked to participate in the entrance exam? They weren't even familiar with the royal school. Everyone present was extremely shocked. This was because the royal school did not recruit students every year. They would only recruit once every few years. And the students they recruited were all top-notch talents in their respective fields. Moreover, the proportion of female students that were recruited was very small. What was going on now? All of a sudden, he recruited the entire Seekong Planet battle team, and even recruited 2 girls in a row. Although there was a possibility of failing the entrance test, generally speaking, the probability of failing was extremely low. Generally, if one could get an invitation letter, it was basically a done deal to get into the school. Look, why is that invitation letter golden? Yeah, my mechanical wooden bird is Director Chi Duo's voice. Why is this Principal Yun? Chapter 2744. Could it be that Principal Yun personally invited the Crown Princess and the rest to join the Seekong Star battle team? How is that possible? Zhongli Jiwei's expression was practically distorted as she glared at the little Crown Princess and the rest in disbelief. She didn't believe it. No matter what, she didn't dare to believe that Principal Yun would actually personally invite the little Crown Princess to participate in the entrance test. On the side, Chen Baojia was also so angry that her lungs were about to hurt. Her charming eyes darkened as she looked at Arbor. No matter how angry she was inside, she still revealed the most appropriate sweet smile on her face. Congratulations, Crown Princess. Chen Baojia revealed a pleasing expression and said with a smile, "We were just saying that the Crown Princess didn't receive an invitation, but she's here now." Mu Jingfeng also felt his face glowing, and he couldn't help but laugh out loud. And it's even an invitation personally sent by Principal Yun. He emphasized again, intending to remind the various family heads that his daughter couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as other families' children. The difference in the invitation was like heaven and earth. Unexpectedly, it attracted Family Head Do's sneer. "Family Head Mu, are you misunderstanding something? Principal Yun invited the Arbor students, not your Mu family." Mu Jingfeng instantly felt unwell when Family Head Do brought up the matter that he had deliberately ignored earlier. If this wasn't a slap in the face, then what was? The emperor was in a good mood and nodded. Since the Crown Princess also received an invitation, then go with the Crown Prince when the time comes. Your brother Zheng is also in the academy, so he can also give guidance when the time comes. Second elder and third elder seek an audience. Invite them in. The emperor paused and glanced at his son. Could it be that second elder and third elder were already standing on the little Crown Princess side? If not, why would his son make such an arrangement? The emperor felt that he had discovered the truth. He looked at the 2 elders who walked into the main hall and revealed a smile, as if he was looking at an ally. It's been hard on the 2 elders to specially come out of seclusion to uphold justice for my son. It's what we should do. The 2 elders were dressed in black robes. One of them was slightly thin and had a brandy nose. He was in high spirits and his eyes were bright. The other person was short and chubby. He wore a minister's hat on his head. When he walked to the center of the hall, he looked at Arbor and blinked. Jojo was expressionless. Arbor had seen these 2 old men when he was in Shuntian Prefecture, so he naturally knew them. That old man with rosacea was an alcoholic, and had even robbed her of her winter fruit wine. Later, when the Jing family of the Panga clan sent people to hunt her down, the old man even tried to clean up the mess for them. Although it was the emperor's idea, it was also the old man's fault. For the sake of the Crimson Nimbus boat that he had given him, Jojo decided to look down on him a little less. The fat old man had snatched a pot of porridge from her. He was simply a glutton. When fourth elder saw that his 2 old brothers had also come, he couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. He asked embarrassedly, "Second elder, third elder, why did you suddenly come out of seclusion? If you don't come out of seclusion, are you going to overturn the heavens?" Second elder scolded fourth elder, his brandy nose trembling slightly in the air. Fine. He had to regain the good impression of him in front of the little girl. For this reason, He had to fiercely make his presence known before third elder. Fourth elder looked at his brother with a dumbfounded expression. He didn't understand who he had offended, and why he was suddenly being scolded. These 2 days were extremely busy. If there wasn't enough time to add 2 chapters, then let's add 1. Chapter 2745. If you don't understand the situation, don't blindly meddle in the young couple's marriage. Second elder said unhappily. Moreover, didn't you all see it just now? The principal of the royal school directly sent an invitation to the young crown princess. Besides the crown princess, who else would have such an honor? Second elder glared at fourth elder and the others with a look of disappointment and said casually, "All right, let's start the voting again. Those who agree with the crown prince marrying Miss Qiao, raise your hand." Second elder and third elder raised their hands at the same time. When they saw the 4 people's dumbfounded expressions, they immediately stepped forward and kicked fifth elder, lifting his arm. Everyone. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have dared to believe it. They thought that the elders' council's decision-making process was prudent and meticulous, but it was actually so sloppy and hilarious. It really blinded everyone's dog eyes. Fifth elder also felt like he had been fucked. He had always liked to smooth things over and maintain a neutral position, but now he was forcefully dragged onto the pirate ship by second elder. If fourth elder's piercing gaze could stab him, he would have died countless times by now. Sigh, just thinking about it made him feel incomparably depressed. How did this become his fault? Was this his fault? Fourth elder was extremely angry. When second elder and the other 2 lowered their arms, he also shouted, "Those who disagree with the crown prince marrying Miss Qiao, raise your hand." Fourth elder, sixth elder, and seventh elder raised their 3 claws at the same time. Fourth elder's pair of bull-like eyes were still staring at second elder with disdain. Second elder, third elder, just because Principal Yun of the royal school sent an invitation to Miss Qiao, doesn't mean that she has the right to become the honorable crown princess. This old man still stands by my words. If Miss Qiao wants to become the crown princess, she still has to go through a strict examination. Zhongli Jiwei silently gave fourth elder 18 thumbs up. In her heart, she naturally felt that fourth elder's words were very reasonable. Who said that receiving an invitation meant everything? Perhaps this Qiao Mu had merely run into a stroke of dumb luck. Second elder looked at fourth elder, and the other 2 as if they were fools. He said angrily, "You 3 old things don't cause trouble all day long." Fourth elder had an aggrieved expression on his face as if he was saying, "Second brother, how dare you scold us like that?" He glared at second elder and said, "Second brother, although the matters of the elders guild are usually handled by you and third brother, but we also have the right to make decisions." "That's right. That's right." Elder 6 and Elder 7 nodded along with Elder 4. "We also have the right to make decisions." Second brother, third brother, you can't be so obstinate and opinionated. That's right, that's right. He even dragged old fifth onto the pirate ship. What you're doing is irresponsible to the crown prince. The 6 elders rolled up their sleeves and were about to fight in the main hall. The great emperor's eyelids twitched, and he hurriedly said, "Everyone calm down." The old man with rosacea took a deep breath and stared at fourth elder with bright eyes. He said with a sincere expression, "Fourth brother, I'm doing this for your own good. Damn it, don't make trouble for yourself. If you get into trouble, no one can save you. You just have to bite the hand of a young couple. What's the point of doing that? Right now it's a 3-on-3 decision." Fourth elder said with a dark expression, "I still stand by my words. Miss Qiao must accept the examination." Chapter 2746. The old man with rosacea was so angry that his beard blew and his eyes widened. This old fourth was more stubborn than a bull. What if he wanted to beat him up? "State preceptor, what do you think?" Sixth elder suddenly turned his head and looked at the state preceptor, who was silent at the side. Now that the elders guild is in a tie of 3 against 3, I wonder if state preceptor has any good suggestions. Fourth elder's eyes lit up slightly, and he nodded with a serious face. "That's right. State preceptor, You are experienced and knowledgeable, so you can give us some suggestions. State Preceptor, why did this fire burn him again? Why not just let him quietly drink by the side? State Preceptor coughed lightly and looked up with a faint smile. I can't interfere too much with the Elders Guild's matters. The best way is to wait for your Grand Elder Kong Yin to come back. Everyone couldn't help but look at each other. State Preceptor, you are not joking, right? How long would it take for Grand Elder Kong Yin to come back and preside over this matter? Everyone knew that Great Elder Kong Yin had disappeared for who knows how many years. No one knew where she had gone to travel. State Preceptor nodded and said, of course. In the end, the Elders Guild's matters should be settled by the Chief Grand Elder himself. Isn't this reasonable? What you said made sense. Everyone nodded silently and looked at each other. Then this matter, are we just going to drag it out like this? Fourth Elder looked at the State Preceptor with a troubled expression. State Preceptor's words were not without reason. Indeed, the Elders Guild's decisions must be passed through the Grand Elder. But now waiting for Grand Elder Kong Yin to come back and make a decision felt more difficult than directly testing the little girl. Could it be that as long as Grand Elder Kong Yin didn't come back, the Elders Guild couldn't make a decision and admit the little girl's identity as the Crown Princess? Chen Baojia, Zhongli Jiwei, and the others who attended the meeting almost laughed out loud in their hearts. After all this, the little Crown Princess was even more unlucky. Now they had to wait for Grand Elder Kong Yin to come back and confirm her identity. Ha ha ha. How long would they have to wait? He might as well accept the Fourth Elder's decision and pass the Elders Guild's decision. Who asked her to do it? Who asked her to look down on the people from the Elders Guild? Who asked her to say, not just any Tom, Dick, or Harry can test me? Ha ha ha, now it's going to be smooth, right? Just wait for Great Elder Kong Yin. Perhaps, he might be able to meet the Chief Grand Elder in his lifetime. The smile on the corner of Zhongli Jiwei's mouth was almost unconcealable. They were all mocking and snickering at Miss Chiao. Arbor raised his head and carefully sized up the State Preceptor with a faint smile on his face. Although this guy's face was full of indifference, and a faint smile hung at the corner of his mouth, it still made people feel that something was wrong. The words of the State Preceptor sounded fair in public, as if there was no problem at all. But in the end, it was not good for Jojo. It didn't seem like he was targeting Jojo, but he also couldn't feel that the State Preceptor had any good intentions towards Jojo. While Arbor was sizing up the State Preceptor, the State Preceptor even turned his face and smiled like an expert, holy and gentle, generously allowing him to size him up. How strange. Arbor unhappily retracted his gaze. There seemed to be a flash of light in his mind, but he couldn't catch it in time. Mo Lushing said with a sullen face, I have decided to reorganize the wedding banquet. Your Majesty, please reconsider. Chapter 2747. Fourth Elder and the other two clasped their hands together and said, Your Majesty, the ancestral rules cannot be violated. We still have to wait for our Grand Elder Kong Yin to come back to confirm his identity. Yes, let's wait for Grand Elder. The courtiers looked at each other and felt that today's matter would not be settled peacefully. The little Crown Princess and His Highness the Crown Prince were not to be trifled with. The Council of Elders was making all sorts of excuses and actually pushed the decision to Great Elder Kong Yin, who was traveling and not returning. How could they endure this? What decision do you have to wait for me? Suddenly, a deep voice came from outside the hall, accompanied by a burst of comfortable laughter. I didn't expect that the Council of Elders would still respect me so much, even though I have been traveling for so many years. Once there is a decision, you still have to wait for me to make the decision. Great. Ha 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 ha. The corners of everyone's mouths twitched, and they looked at each other blankly. The same voice roared in their hearts. It can't be? It can't be so coincidental. Everyone is here, and a ghost is here? Great Elder Kong Yin really appeared? Looking at Fourth Elder, Fifth Elder, Sixth Elder and the rest, they all had confused expressions and turned to look at the entrance of the hall. An old man in his 60s wearing a gray monk robe strode in from outside the door. His bald head was comparable to 3,000 lights, so bright that it almost blinded everyone's eyes. Oh my God! Was this really Grand Elder Kong Yin? It was just that he had changed into a strange appearance, causing everyone to reveal a surprised expression. Greetings to Grand Elder Kong Yin. The old man with rosacea was the first to recover from his shock, and did not dare to be rash at all. He hurriedly bowed and bowed. As soon as he moved, the third elder, fourth elder, and the others behind him also moved in unison, bowing in unison. Greetings, Great Elder Kong Yin. Ha 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 ha, good. Grand Elder Kong Yin stroked his beard and chuckled. I didn't expect that after traveling for so many years, and not caring about worldly affairs, all of you would still respect me so much. Good. Not bad. Everyone, big brother, are you joking? No one can see through your cultivation. Who would dare to disrespect you? Are you courting death? The corner of the old man's mouth twitched as he coughed lightly. Great Elder, you must have traveled far and wide when you're outside. You must have seen a lot. It's good that you're back. Now that you're back, we can continue to listen to your teachings and preside over important matters. Ha 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 ha. Great Elder Kong Yin laughed out loud and nodded. Second brother, you and third brother have worked hard all these years. It's no trouble at all. The old man with rosacea hurriedly cupped his hands in greeting and took a step back. He then used his elbow to poke the fat third elder, who was standing still beside him. Third elder hurriedly cupped his hands and said, Great Elder, you've returned at the right time. Coincidentally, the Elder Council has some matters to attend to and needs the Grand Elder to make a decision. Now all 7 members of the Elders Guild were present. Just now it was a 3-3 decision. Now, as long as the Great Elder raised his hand, the matter would be settled immediately. However, according to the Great Elder's unreliable character in the past, the old man with rosacea turned to look at the little crown princess worriedly. He saw that the little crown princess was staring fixedly at her big brother. Her gaze was fixed on Grand Elder Kong Yin, and there was a strange look in her eyes as if. Chapter 2748. Ahahaha. Grand Elder Kong Yin felt that if he did not turn back, the crown princess' gaze would pierce through the back of his head. So he calmly turned his head back and nodded at the crown princess with an awkward smile. Ahahaha, Jojo, it's been a long time. The entire place fell into silence. Zhongli Jiwei and Chen Baojia, who already had ugly expressions, widened their eyes in shock. They glared fiercely at the young crown prince consort and Great Elder Kong Yin, almost not daring to face what was about to happen. What was going on? Grand Elder Kong Yin acted as if he was an old acquaintance of the little crown princess, and even greeted her so naturally, looking at the little crown princess's displeased expression, and then looking at the fawning smile on Grand Elder Kong Yin's face. Everyone suddenly felt as if the sky was about to fall. The little crown princess and Grand Elder Kong Yin were old acquaintances? The aloof image of the Elders' Council had already faded away in everyone's hearts. You said that you would bring Kong Kong back after your travels. You came all the way to the Divine Continent? The more the little girl thought about it, the more she felt that this old man must have cheated her, being a hands-off shopkeeper, throwing Kong Kong to her, and in the end running off to play in the mortal world by himself. You're not a monk. Who says I'm not? Grand Elder Kong Yin quickly waved his hand and chanted a Buddhist mantra. This old monk has been a monk for many years. The rosacea-nosed second elder suddenly felt unwell, and he looked at his boss with an incredulous expression. Big brother, what happened to you? From what they saw, their boss must have been greatly agitated, and that was why he went to shave his head and become a monk. Grand Elder Kong Yin's mouth twitched silently, and he looked at second elder and the others with a serious expression. I can tell you with certainty, this old man is not agitated at all. Don't change the topic. The little crown princess said exasperatedly. You said that you would bring Kong Kong back after traveling for a while. Why did she have a feeling that this old man was deliberately throwing the little monk to her to take care of? He said that the Shadow Moon Temple was poor, and that the old monk was traveling outside, so it was not safe to leave the little monk alone in the temple. It turned out that he wanted to run back to Shenzhou, so he left Kong Kong to her. It's a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. Great Elder Kong Yin smiled embarrassedly and quickly said, Kong Kong, Your life is pretty good right now. With the benefactress's family taking care of him, this old monk is very relieved. The second elder looked at him, as if he was looking at a weirdo. Something was wrong with Big Brother. When he was talking, he suddenly turned into old monk and benefactress. Did he really become a monk? Great elder. As soon as the fourth elder opened his mouth, Great Elder Kong In slapped the back of his head. Fourth brother, why are you so silly? Great Elder Kong In angrily roared at fourth elder. Why are you blindly meddling in the affairs of the two of them? Why don't you just listen to second brother? The fourth elder was dumbfounded. Great Elder suddenly reached out and slapped the back of his head in public. Was this appropriate? The matter of the wedding banquet is settled. Your Majesty can decide on your own. Great Elder cupped his hands in salute to the great emperor, who was sitting on the throne, with an equally dumbfounded expression. He turned around and slapped the back of sixth elder's head as well, and scolded with a look of disappointment. I say, why are you all so stubborn? Ah, this era is improving. Ah, this mainland is developing. Ah. Chapter 2749. What is the responsibility of the Elder Council of the Divine Land? It is to protect the safety of the people of the Divine Land. To protect the safety of His Majesty and His Highness the Crown Prince. Other than that, don't meddle in things that don't require our attention. Elder Kong In reprimanded and swung the sleeves of his gray monk robe. Enough. Go do what you need to do and cultivate in seclusion. Fourth elder, sixth elder, and the others were all intimidated by Elder Kong Yin's reprimand. Only then did they remember Elder Kong's bad temper in the past. Now it seemed that he had restrained his temper a lot. Could it be because he became a monk? Second elder and third elder looked at the bald head of their own first elder, and revealed an indescribable expression. Arbor was still glaring at the back of his bald head. Elder Kong In turned his head, and looked at the little guy with a smile. With a fawning expression he said, Jojo, don't worry. With this old monk here, you will have my full support. The Elder Council has absolutely no objection to your marriage with His Highness the Crown Prince. The Elder Council has unanimously agreed. With that, he turned and glared at fourth elder and the others. Fourth elder, sixth elder, and the others hurriedly nodded and said, yes. What a joke, hadn't Elder Kong smacked him enough? If he dared to disagree, it was hard to guarantee that Big Brother wouldn't smack him again in the next second. It was simply too sullen. Xiaomu gazed at Kong In suspiciously. Tell me honestly, does Kong Kong have another identity? Otherwise, what was wrong with Elder Kong that he still had to stay by his side? No. Elder Kong In hurriedly shook his head and said, do you miss Kong Kong, that child? No problem. This old monk will send someone to bring him here in a while. What do you think? Nothing. Emo Lien rolled her eyes in annoyance and reached out to hold Arbor's small hand. At this time, there were many voices below, whispering secretly. I've always heard that Elder Kong In seemed to be friends with Long Chuyan of the Long family despite their age difference. Now it seems to be true. Otherwise, why would he be so good to Long Chuyan's daughter? Yes. Young Crown Prince Consort, you're really lucky. In the future, with the support of the chief elder of the Council of Elders of the Divine Land, who on the Divine Land would dare to doubt her identity as the Crown Princess? Chen Baojia pinched her pale fingers and wanted to howl. However, she could only keep it in her heart. Just like her, Zhongli Jiwei was also holding her hands tightly in her sleeves. She was so angry that she almost couldn't breathe. Madame Zhongli looked at her daughter worriedly. She wanted to say something, but her words were stuck in her throat. At this time, it was useless to say anything. Everyone knew what the full support of the first elder meant. In the future, no one in the Divine Land would be able to shake the position of the little Crown Princess. Things had taken a strange turn for the worse. The great emperor expressed that even he couldn't see through it. But since it was developing in a good direction, then so be it. Mo Luxing said indifferently. Since no one has any objections, then the wedding ceremony will be handed over to the Ministry of Rites. It must be done within 3 months. Yes, Your Majesty. The Minister of Rites hurriedly stood up and tactfully agreed. The young couple looked at each other. Prince Mo smiled at her. Chapter 2750. 440 Departure for Wind Thunder City. It was troublesome to reorganize the wedding banquet. However, it could shut the mouths of those busybodies and make those with ulterior motives slap themselves in the face. The little crown princess expressed that she was willing to cooperate. The second day after the banquet, the group of students heading to Wind Thunder City began to prepare for departure. Wind Thunder City was located in the center of the 3 prefectures and was independent of the 3 prefectures. No matter which party rushed over from their own capital, it would take about 5 to 6 days with flying beasts. A horse carriage would be even slower. Don't even think about it. Even if it was a spirit stallion, it would take at least a month or 2 to break its legs to run. It was already the 7th day of the 3rd month. Rushing over at this time was already very tight. If something happened on the way, it would really be a bit of a surprise. However, Sir Jojo had Chi Shout Songlong, which could shorten the time by at least 1 day. Early in the morning, everyone could see flying spirit beasts flying out of the capital from the designated flying platforms. The commoners dragged their wives and children to the streets to watch as if it was the new year. When they saw a large spirit beast carrying a person into the air, they cheered. There were also many servants of aristocratic families who returned from grocery shopping. When they heard the cheers, they proudly said, "This is our family's 2nd young master and 3rd young master. For people from our Dou family are going to the Imperial College to participate in the entrance exam. Ha ha ha, 7 young masters and young mistresses from our Qin estate are going together. Wow, the Qin family is really a big family. Amazing. It seems that many people from the Duan family are going as well. I heard that the 3rd young master of the Duan family is about to break through to the divine realm. Oh my god, isn't the 3rd young master only 23 years old? Yes. Wow, look, is that the Qin estate's flying spirit artifact? Yes. Oh my god." From time to time, there would be people screaming from the crowd. The onlookers were discussing it happily. A large flying spirit artifact carrying the people of the Qin estate glided across the sky, causing a series of exclamations. In an open space in the small garden of the Eastern Palace, there was a 3-story ship parked there. A group of eunuchs and palace maids were working in full swing. Like flowing water, they carried pastries, food, clothes, and utensils up and down the boat. Their eyes were filled with unconcealable joy. Look, their crown princess actually has a spaceship. Everyone else had to travel on spirit beasts. Even if a clan had a flying spirit artifact, it was impossible for it to be as big as the crown princess 3-story ship. Is everyone done wasting time? Get on the boat when you're done. Let's go. Fatty stood at the bow of the boat and shouted at the people who were dawdling in the room. Ma Ta, Lu Yu Qi Xian, and the others pushed open the door at the same time. There were a few bags on their backs, and everyone's eyes twitched when they saw them. Brothers and sisters, don't you all have inner worlds? How could the others know that the Seacombe Planet battle team had long been scared of being scammed by others? Now, no matter where he went, whether he had an inner world or not, whether he could use it or not, he had to carry a few bags with him. Only then would he feel at ease. Jojo, hurry up. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl dressed in red battle clothes. Her long hair was tied into a long ponytail behind her waist. There was an interesting golden doll headdress on her head that glowed with a faint golden light under the sunlight. The little jade person raised her head and lightly jumped, her body landing lightly on the deck. Prince Emo smiled slightly. Speaking of the next chapter, the normal time is 6 chapters. No matter if I'm 7, 8, or 10 chapters, it's all me squeezing sleep to add more chapters. So there's no problem with fewer chapters. I've been adding chapters continuously for a month now. Every day, I'm updating 10 or 8 chapters. My energy is limited, and I'm busy with work at the end of the year. I also need to rest. I'll start at 6 chapters today. If I have time, I'll add more chapters. I also hope to write more brilliantly and not let you down. Chapter 2751. His Jojo was becoming more and more exquisite and adorable. Looking at his red battle clothes, he was so beautiful that people couldn't take their eyes off him. The group of youths boarded the 3-story ship with bags of various sizes hanging on their bodies. It was a bit of an eyesore. Arbor glanced at them and held back his laughter. His little face was serious. Qi Xianxian was dressed in an emerald green dress, which made the little girl's round face look even more rosy and cute. She carried 2 bags on her back and 2 on her left and right shoulders. Once she boarded the ship, she waved her little hand and said, "All right, everyone is here. Let's set off." Prince Mo's eyes twitched. His gaze swept over these idiots. "What are you all doing? Going to the academy like this? It's like you're escaping from a disaster. Don't you think it's funny?" Little Fatty patted the bags on his stomach and said earnestly to the Crown Prince, "Your Highness, do you want to prepare a bag as well? Let me tell you, when we train in the future, there's an 80% chance that the academy will cheat us and not let us use our inner worlds. Don't look down on these small bags. They'll be of great use in the future." This Crown Prince has a storage talisman. Little Fatty's eyes lit up. He slapped his thigh and said, "That's right." Arbor rolled his eyes at the sky. Qi Xianxian said with a straight face, "Then what if the academy forces us and even confiscates our storage talismans?" Mata coughed lightly and said, "Then let's each carry a bag in case we need it." Lu Yu and the others had already silently put away the extra bags. They only carried a small bag of food and water on their backs. Prince Mo's eyes twitched. He pulled his Jojo to the side and whispered in the little guy's ear, "Let's stay away from them." His teammates were not smart enough. He didn't know if they would be infected in the future. Sir Jojo's eyes sparkled. He lowered his head and looked at the palace maids and eunuchs who were waving at them at the bottom of the ship. The little guy also raised his little hand and waved. Suddenly, a black messenger bird flapped its wings and flew over. It stopped on the deck and nodded at them. The messenger bird spat out a letter and a storage talisman. Arbor took the letter and read it. It was a letter from Grandpa Moo. The letter congratulated her for going to the royal school to study. It also mentioned that due to the tight schedule, they had only prepared a few things as a reward for her. Once she returned from the royal school, she was asked to visit her grandmother whenever she had the time. Xiao Mu silently lowered her eyes and put away the storage talisman and letter. She then stroked the messenger bird's head and watched as it flapped its wings and flew away. Prince Mo knew this child the best. Just by looking at her expression, he knew that this child's heart had finally softened for this old man. In such a big family with 1,000 years of history, there are always good and bad people. Emolian smiled and stroked her little hand. She said softly, "At most, we'll chop off those rotten and withered branches in the future and let the healthy ones grow stronger. Don't worry, I'll be with you." Prince Mo rubbed her head and said softly, "Okay." Arbor nodded. She waved her little hand and said, "Let's go." The mechanical people on the red Nimbus ship started moving with all their might. A huge ship suddenly took off and flew directly into the depths of the blue sky. In the small garden of the Eastern Palace, a group of eunuchs and palace maids cheered as if it was the new year. They raised their heads and waved as they watched their masters leave. Chapter 2752. Their little faces were flushed with joy. They were really too happy. Who said that their little crown princess came from a small village in a remote mountainous area? Spit on their faces. You haven't seen their crown princess's great ability yet. The crimson firmament blue wave ship passed through the clouds. Only cultivators with extraordinary eyesight could vaguely make out a ship's shadow passing by. As for the commoners looking around in the city, they naturally couldn't see it. Not long after Arbor's ship left, an exhausted team arrived at the northern city gate of the imperial capital. The leader of the group was a young man in his 20s. His face was covered with dust from a long journey. There were about 12 or 13 people in the team. Once they entered the city gate, everyone looked around. "Oh my God, we're finally in the capital." A youth about 14 or 15 years old followed behind the youth. He wiped the sweat on his face with his sleeve and muttered, "I wonder if His Highness and the others are anxious from waiting." A thin girl about 28 or 29 years old with high cheekbones rolled her eyes and couldn't help but say, "Why wouldn't they be anxious from waiting? I think they're probably exhausted from waiting." Who knew that so many things would happen along the way? The youth Zhou Huan, scratched his head and said awkwardly, "Didn't we save 3 of our colleagues along the way?" Another youth about 20 years old hurriedly cupped his hands and said, "It's the 3 of us who delayed your journey." This person had a gentle appearance. His appearance wasn't outstanding, but his temperament was excellent. Sorry. Another man also cupped his hands and said, "If it weren't for us siblings, we wouldn't have." "All right, I don't blame you." Chi Hua waved his hand and said, It's fine. Anyway, His Highness the Crown Prince should know what happened to us. We'll go now." Before he could finish speaking, a black shadow suddenly appeared in front of them and carefully sized them up from head to toe. "Chi Hua and Zhou Ah, yes." Zhou nodded foolishly. "All of you follow me." The black-clothed youth swept his gaze over them with a serious expression before turning around and walking towards the south of the city. After taking a few steps, she looked back and saw Zhou and the others standing at the city gate in a daze. She couldn't help but frown and yell at them in annoyance. "Hurry up, don't waste time. It took you almost a month to travel from the South City to the Imperial capital. What a waste of your speed." "Ugh, I'm being despised by a stranger." Zhou and the others looked bitterly at the young man who was ridiculing them. Who are you?" "I am Enchu. They are the Crown Princess's bodyguards." "Oh, so it's the Crown Princess men." Everyone had a look of realization. An old man in his 70s politely cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for waiting for a long time, little brother." She nodded at the old man and said, "It's no trouble at all. Please go ahead." Thank you. They didn't see how Enchu moved, but after turning the corner, 3 spacious carriages stopped at the side of the road and waited for them. Everyone was already exhausted. They hurriedly cupped their hands and thanked Enchu before getting into the carriage to rest. There were 2 women in the group. One of them was Shun Fei, a skinny 28 or 29-year-old girl who came from the South City with old Mr. Mu and a few other talisman masters. Chapter 2753. The other person was Pei Yu, Chen Feng, and Chen Qi, whom Zhou and the others had saved on the way. Chen Qi was a very cheerful and talkative girl. She got along well with everyone. Her small face was full of smiles all day long, full of vitality and youth. Her brother Chen Feng was a man of few words, but overall, he was easy to get along with. Zhou and the other talisman masters slowly ran from the southern part of the city to the capital. Not to mention, just as Anka ridiculed, they really made them run for a month. Thinking about it, she couldn't help but facepalm. "Hey, big brother, where are we going?" Zhou poked her head out of the carriage and asked the unsmiling black-clothed youth sitting on the shaft. Anka glanced at him. "Go to Huaqi Street in the southern part of the city." Zhou poked Chi Hua's arm. "Your family owns a street." "Hey, go away." Chi Hua slapped her hand away in annoyance. "Hee." Zhou quipped a few words and stopped while she was ahead. She lowered the carriage curtain and leaned against the window, her eyes rolling as she looked at the bustling scenery along the way. The capital is really lively. The carriage quickly arrived at the residence on Huaqi Street in the southern part of the city. After this residence was taken back from Mu Jingfeng's mistress, it was renovated, and some of the furnishings inside were also replaced. Zhou and the others came late. Wang Yan, Gudapeng, and the others who came early had already settled down in the wing of the northern courtyard. There were only 3 alchemists at the moment, so they lived in the relatively smaller northern courtyard. The southern courtyard was left to the talisman masters. The carriage stopped in front of the residence on Huaqi Street. Everyone jumped down from the carriage and walked into the residence. An old butler stood at the door, already waiting respectfully for a long time. Seeing everyone come over, he hurriedly smiled and cupped his hands. "You must be a talisman master. Please come in. Zhou and the others hurriedly cupped their hands and returned the greeting. Everyone walked in noisily. With the old butler leading the way, the group went to the southern courtyard. "Everyone can stay here with ease in the future. If you need anything, just let the servants know. This old one will arrange everything here." "Thank you for your trouble, old butler." Old Sir Mu smiled at the old man. The old butler was flattered and waved his hand. "It's no trouble at all. Sir Anku, do you have any other orders? And Chu shook his head. You can leave first. Yes. After the old steward led the manservants out of the courtyard, he secretly urged them to leave before turning to look at old Master Mu and the others. You have all come at the wrong time. The Crown Princess and His Highness the Crown Prince have just left the city for the Wind Thunder City's Royal Academy. Royal Academy? Everyone was stunned for a moment before revealing a surprised expression. In the Great Divine Lands, who wouldn't know of the Royal School? It was both unexpected and reasonable that the Crown Prince and Crown Princess would be invited to the Royal School. All of you can stay here at ease and study talismans. You don't have to worry about other mundane matters. That's good. Old Master Mu nodded with a smile. The Crown Princess means that if no one has any objections, our little association will be called the Heaven's Vault Society in the future. And Su said indifferently, regardless of whether you make talismans for auction or as a gift, they must all be signed as products of the Heaven's Sanctum Guild. Everyone nodded without any objections. Then we are established? Zhou Huan asked with a surprised expression. Do we need to hold some ceremony? Chapter 2754. The corner of Ensu's mouth twitched, and he coughed lightly. Our Crown Princess is not a particular person. Even if you want to hold a ceremony, you should wait for the Crown Princess to come back from the academy. Everyone nodded again and again, feeling a little happy in their hearts. In the past, when they were drifting in the martial world, they had to scheme for a living. Now they only needed to concentrate on talisman research. Seeing their submissive expressions, Ensu took out a handwritten copy from his pocket. This is what the Crown Princess left for you to read before she left. It records some talisman techniques and some of the Crown Princess research. Keep it well. Thank you. Qihua reached out and took it. After reading 2 pages, his eyes were full of surprise, and he almost immediately sank into it. Zhou Huan said repeatedly, Big brother, let me see Big brother. Old Mr. Mu also stretched out his neck and wanted to reach out to take it. Brother Qihua, let this old man take a look. And Su silently rolled his eyes. Everyone, don't be anxious. You all came back covered in dust. Go wash up and rest first. I'll have someone prepare lunch. You can study it tomorrow. Very good, very good. Old Mr. Mu nodded with a smile. Thank you for your trouble, Lord Ensu. Thus, the group of people from the Tianfu Society settled down and began their wonderful lives. Many years later, when the entire 3 continents raised their thumbs at the mention of the Tianfu Society, there were also people who asked, how was the Tianfu Society established? Those who knew could only silently lower their heads and point to their fingers. I'm sorry, everyone, it's not as grand as you think. The leader of our Tianfu Society was not so particular. On the day of the establishment, the weather was very good. A group of senior members of the Tianfu Society came to the imperial capital tired like dogs and established our Tianfu Society in a courtyard on Huaqi Street. Zhou Huan asked someone to prepare the bath water. When she pushed the door and entered, she couldn't help but stop and turn to look at the servant standing at the side. Hey, let me ask you, what kind of people live in the north courtyard next door? She didn't know if she could go over when she was free. Just as the servant was about to speak, he heard a loud tremor from the north courtyard. Everyone silently looked up at the sky. The corner of Zhou Huan's eyes twitched. Earthquake. Everyone, don't be nervous. The 3 alchemists of the North Court would do this every few days. The servant said expressionlessly. It seemed that he had already gotten used to it. Zhou Huan and the others were speechless. It seemed that the exciting days had just begun. Maijiu's section break. Above the dark blue sky, a circular air transportation spiritual artifact was flying at a constant speed in the air. Suddenly, countless huge black eagles rushed out from the side and rushed towards the air transportation spirit artifact in unison. With a loud bang, the air transportation spirit tool was swayed left and right by the flock of eagles. It was like a small boat in the middle of a huge wave, drifting in the wind and rain. It was a bit pitiful. Everyone sit tight. Wait for me to stabilize the air transportation spiritual tool. The helmsman hurriedly exclaimed. Your Highness, how are you? Duan Yuan was currently lazily leaning against a soft cushion, with a wine cup in his hand. After being rammed by this flock of flying eagles, they were thrown into a commotion. Some of the wine in his hand spilled out and dripped onto his clean white robe. His peach blossom eyes narrowed dangerously as he glanced unhappily at the flock of black eagles outside the window. Chapter 2755. Why were these blind things so loathsome? They could even be rammed while staying inside the air transportation spirit artifact and drinking wine. Thankfully, the air transportation spirit artifact that his father gifted him was made of good materials. Even after being rammed a few times, there wasn't any damage to its exterior, and it still steadily swayed about among the flock of eagles. A middle-aged man's expression was grim as he tried his best to stabilize the air transportation spirit artifact's direction. This control panel was actually very simple. One only needed to place a spirit stone into the card slot, and the person manning the rudder only needed to move the direction. Normally, when flying straight, one didn't need to move and only needed to see if there were any obstacles ahead. But now, this was also the first time the person manning the rudder encountered such a situation. Logically speaking, their air transportation spirit artifact wasn't considered too small. When such a large air transportation spirit artifact was traveling outside, most flying spirit beasts with eyes wouldn't pounce over and court death. After all, strictly speaking, people who could own air transportation spirit artifacts were not ordinary people. They were definitely members of large factions and clans. These flying spirit beasts also had intelligence, so it was impossible for them to be so blind. Duan Yu sat up slightly and placed the wine cup in his hand on a small table on the side. The appliances inside the air transportation spirit artifact, from large tables and chairs to small cups and plates, were all fixed with special magnets. Once placed on the small table, the cups naturally wouldn't move. "Open the window," Duan Yu ordered dryly. It was truly unbearably annoying to have so many disturbances along the way. Why were these flying spirit beasts ramming into his air transportation spirit artifact for no reason? He wouldn't believe it if someone said they weren't being manipulated. As for who was so unwilling to let him safely arrive at the Royal Academy, haha, it was obvious even if one used their legs to think. The middle-aged man manning the air transportation spirit artifact quickly complied and closed the window beside Duan Yu with a sweep of his spiritual energy. A gust of cold wind blew in from outside. The weather in early spring was naturally colder at high altitudes. Immediately, several black eagles blindly pounced in Duan Yu's direction while flapping their wings. In the blink of an eye, a silvery white flame rose up and shot towards those black eagles' wings with a whoosh. The black eagles were immediately ignited by this silvery white flame. From its wings to its body to its head, everything was enveloped by the silver white flames. It screamed in pain. What was even more frightening was that this silver white flame was like gangrene attached to the bone. As long as it touched the slightest bit, it would incessantly burn. It spread from the wings of this black eagle to the tail feathers of that black eagle. A flock of black eagles began to burn around the air transportation spiritual tool. Gradually, all of them were caught in the fire. None of them were spared. Every single one of them rolled in the air and wailed. Every single one of them was burned to ashes by the seemingly inconspicuous but boiling flames. Many of the subordinates in the air transportation spiritual tool were shocked. They rarely saw their master get angry, but it was clear that even though this master usually didn't get angry, it didn't mean that he wasn't scary when he got angry. So this was the Demon Emperor's fire. Everyone exhaled softly from the bottom of their hearts. Their expressions were filled with shock and fear. They didn't dare to speak and just silently lowered their heads, praying in their hearts that their master's anger would quickly pass. "Close it," Duan Yu coldly ordered. The helmsman hurriedly rolled down the window of the air transportation spiritual tool. Chapter 2756. The air transportation spirit artifact safely passed through the flock of eagles that had been burned to ashes and continued to fly forward steadily. Along the way to the academy, there were always some blind people who tried to do troublesome things to obstruct him. Their actions were truly too naive. The accompanying people were also very clear that their lord was probably in a bad mood right now, so they all shut their mouths. The middle-aged man controlling the air transportation spirit artifact quickly steadied the direction and steered the spirit artifact forward steadily. However, it wasn't long before a tricolored spirit magpie flew over from the side. That spirit magpie was only half the size of the black eagle from before, so it was probably just passing by and not looking for trouble. It actually flew over. The middle-aged man creased his brows and quickly glanced behind him. He reported cautiously, "Your Highness, a tricolored spirit magpie is approaching." "Ignore it," Duan Yu said dryly, not even bothering to lift his eyelids. The middle-aged man nodded and steered the air transportation spirit artifact forward without looking sideways, leaving that approaching spirit magpie behind. In reality, the middle-aged man could clearly see that there were two women standing on top of that spirit magpie, waving at their air transportation spirit artifact nonstop. However, judging from the situation, their lord wasn't someone who was protective of the fairer sex, so he definitely wouldn't be willing to pay attention to them. An accompanying boy servant clearly saw who the figures on the spirit magpie were from the crystal wall in front of them and said meekly, "Your Highness, it seems to be Commandery Princess Xiangchang and Shili Commandery Princess." "Oh." Duan Yu responded and didn't say anything else afterward. The accompanying boy servant naturally understood that this lord wasn't willing to let these two Commandery princesses come up. Commandery Princess Xiangchang stomped her feet angrily while standing on her spirit magpie's back. "It's His Highness the Fourth Prince's spirit artifact." Behind her, Wu Huanxiu couldn't resist rolling her eyes. "I already told you not to wave there." She was acting like a fool. She could tell that His Highness wasn't willing to take them along to the academy on the way. Otherwise, he wouldn't have directly set off from Phoenix Emperor City without saying anything. He simply didn't plan to go with them. This Xiangchang Commandery Princess was really funny and naive. She actually chased all the way here, which really annoyed her. If it weren't for the fact that she only had one spiritual beast that could walk on land, she wouldn't have come to ride on Princess Xiangchang's flying spiritual beast. Xiangchang Commandery Princess was furious. "It must be the person with the air transportation spiritual artifact who didn't see us. After all, he sees us, she definitely won't be like this." Wu Huanxiu could not help but chuckle. How could this person be so self-righteous? How bad must Prince Chen's eyesight be to ignore such big spiritual magpies like them? "I can't be bothered with her." Princess Xiu turned her head away angrily. She secretly decided that she would immediately separate from this idiot when they arrived at the academy. She didn't want to be infected by her low IQ. "Hey Ali, brother Ali." Xiangchang Commandery Princess watched as the air transportation spiritual tool flew faster and faster. In a flash, it turned into a black dot and disappeared in front of them. She could not help but breathe her last. It was simply infuriating. "Don't worry, north-facing Great Forest is just up ahead." At that time, His Highness would have no choice but to put away his flying spirit artifact and cross a part of the forest on foot. Beep beep. Beep beep. The sparks from the sparks illuminated Sir Jojo's bright almond-shaped eyes. Inside north-facing Great Forest, where ancient trees towered into the sky, everyone sat in a circle and barbecued. Chapter 2757. The Great North-Facing Forest and the Sea of Forgetfulness were natural barriers that separated the three states. No matter which imperial capital of the Tsang state or the Divine Prefecture, no one was spared. They had to pass through part of the forest. At this moment, Emolien's group from Arbor had already put away the red firmament waves and were sitting in a corner of the forest barbecuing. The Great North-Facing Forest was rich in resources, and food was everywhere. Little Fatty and the rest caught a few pheasants and barbecued them happily. They rubbed some salt on them and bit into them. They were delicious and tender. Their days were leisurely and carefree. "I heard that the Royal School's test is not difficult at all." Little Fatty bit into a chicken drumstick and said with a laugh, "It seems that all we have to do is walk up and test our 5 spirit origins. Anyone who receives an invitation and has comprehended more than 6 levels of the 5 spirit origins, will definitely be accepted. Everyone looked at each other. Luyu could not help but say, "So that means we will definitely pass the test." Little Fatty nodded and grinned. "You're really a nosy one." Qi Xianxian could not help but laugh. "I haven't seen you go out since we came back, but you've already asked around." "That's right." Little Fatty bit into the crispy chicken and said vaguely, "Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated." Qi Xianxian nodded. "Then I'm relieved." She didn't want to be so high profile as to accept those troublesome invitations, only to end up failing the later assessment. It was fine if she embarrassed herself, but the key point was that she had embarrassed Jojo. She would not let that happen. Those gossipy fellows in the imperial capital would not let go of such a good opportunity to mock them. As they were chatting, they suddenly heard a series of light footsteps coming from the side of the forest. Not long after, someone walked over from the small path through the dense foliage. This was a group of 100 people. The leader was a tall and flirtatious woman, with a pair of slender beautiful eyes. She looked around at everyone's faces. Behind her was a burly man who was nearly 2 meters tall. He was tall and sturdy, and in the cold spring weather his 2 arms were exposed. His arms were bulging with bulging muscles like small hills. The woman and her companions were stunned, as if they didn't expect that there would be a small team barbecuing in this damned place. Then, the woman glanced at Arbor and Emolien. She didn't seem to have any intention of picking a fight, and led the group to an empty space on the side. They must have lived in the great north-facing forest for a long time, and were very familiar with the surrounding environment. As soon as they arrived at the place, they quickly divided into groups to work. They set up tents, hunted beasts, picked up branches, and washed the internal organs of the animals. The division of labor was extremely fast. In less than the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, they were divided into 10 groups. They sat down to rest and eat. Qi Xianxian and the rest curiously sized up the 100-man team. Seeing that the others didn't come over to talk or cause trouble, and that none of them were meddlesome people, they continued to eat the barbecue and whispered a few words. After Jojo activated his silence mode, Qi Xianxian and the others also stopped talking. After eating the barbecue, everyone set up a pot and used the ingredients on the ground to cook some mushroom soup. Not long after, a fragrance wafted out from the small pot. Everyone took their bowls and spoons and quickly scooped up a small bowl of soup. They silently drank it. The people sitting on the other side of the empty space looked like a group of well-trained mercenaries. They ate later than Arbor and the rest, but they ate very quickly. Chapter 2758. While Arbor's group was drinking soup, the mercenaries had already finished eating and were cleaning up. One of the smaller mercenaries looked curiously at Arbor's group. He couldn't help but ask his companion in a low voice, "Hey, who do you think they are?" Judging by their attire, they looked like a group of young masters and young ladies, heading to the great forest in the north. They didn't even have a guard, and were walking alone in the forest? Mind your own business. The other person looked like a veteran mercenary. He glanced at the talkative kid and rolled his eyes. "Did you forget what the leader told us to do again?" "I remember." The small mercenary pursed his lips and said flatly, "Don't cause trouble when you're outside." According to their leader, you don't know what kind of danger you'll face in the future. The most important thing in the world was to be cautious. Maybe you saw someone who wasn't very outstanding, but they had a way to kill you. If you caused trouble and couldn't solve it, you'd be in trouble. Don't you think the leader is being too careful? I don't think so. The old mercenary sneered at him. I'm telling you, if you don't agree with our leader's behavior, you'd better leave as soon as possible. The small mercenary saw him turn and leave. He pursed his lips and didn't say anything, but he was still a little unconvinced. She glanced at Xiaomu's group again and inwardly criticized. They just look like a bunch of young masters and misses who are inexperienced. How could they be dangerous? Clang 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 clang. Leader, there's a fierce battle over there. A scout mercenary walked quickly to the beautiful woman and squatted down. Should we change camps? The beautiful woman was the leader of the dire mercenary group. The muscular man next to her was her partner, Suha. Both of them had a lot of experience as mercenaries. They wouldn't panic at all in this kind of situation. Dyer nodded. Let everyone pack up. When the small mercenary heard his leader's decision, he couldn't help but grumble. Why do we have to pack up when we're just resting? The old mercenary glanced at him unhappily. Dongzi, you talk a lot of nonsense. Just do as I say. The commander must have her own considerations. The young mercenary named Dongzi snorted inwardly and began to tidy up the mess. Whoosh! A flaming iron arrow suddenly landed on a tree. However, the water vapor in the north-facing Great Forest was very thick, and the ancient trees were also covered in water vapor. The flames were not enough to burn a large area. At most, they would only destroy 1 or 2 tree trunks. Dyer furrowed her thin brows. Everyone, pay attention and prepare for battle. While they were talking, a few figures ran over while protecting a person. The whooshing sound of flying iron arrows mixed with clusters of flames made Dyer and the others tense up slightly. Qi Xianxian and the others were cleaning up the pots and pans when they turned around and saw a blind stray arrow shooting towards them. Little Fatty frowned and threw out a punch, deflecting the projectile. Are you courting death? Lu Yu coldly shouted. His voice was not loud, but it was clearly heard by everyone present. A bunch of fools, how dare you disturb our rest? Qi Xianxian said unhappily. Ah, Jojo. Chapter 2759. A certain person, who was escorted out of the forest by several attendants, seemed to have discovered a new continent. With a leap, she appeared in front of Arbor. Just as he was about to reach out to pull her, Prince Mo slapped his hand away without batting an eyelid. Prince Mo's eyelids couldn't help twitching. It was truly a small world. He didn't expect to encounter Duan Yu in this kind of nook and cranny. Arbor was also taken aback. He didn't expect this child to suddenly pop out from the other side. Her large eyes flickered, and she looked behind him with a taut face. Who are those people? Duan Yu's eyes lit up, and he hastily shouted, Jojo, hurry and save me. I'm about to be killed by them. Whoa, was this journey easy? Wasn't it just going to the Royal Academy? Wrongly, that guy actually sent more than one group of people to chase him all the way here. Of course, he also had the intention to play with them. It was just that he also got annoyed after being chased so many times, alright? He didn't want to bother with these weaklings anymore. But these people seemed to have gone mad as they chased after him nonstop. Wasn't it annoying to lose wave after wave of failure? Sir Jojo's small face darkened as he stared at the masked men in black, who had popped out from behind the trees. There were about 20 of them, and they were currently surrounding them with crossbows in their hands. When they saw that there were 9 more people beside Duan Yu, they couldn't help but be startled. The eyes of the leader of the men in black flickered, and he stiffly looked at Arbor's group. He ordered, unrelated people move aside. Don't look for trouble. Jojo. Duan Yu pitifully shrunk behind the little girl, causing Prince Mo to glare at him in disdain. What was going on? Why did these people always like to hide behind his wife? Duan Yu was like this. He Chen was like this. And that damn eldest Qin was also like this. Sir Jojo expressionlessly looked at the men in black before him. Della led her group of mercenaries and stood at a distance to watch. After waiting for a long while, he heard the little girl coldly spit out a word. Scram. The group of black-clothed men pursuing Duan Yu instantly felt extremely displeased. They just didn't want to provoke more people. But it didn't mean that they were afraid of a few young masters and young ladies who looked very young. The black-clothed leader's face darkened as he angrily said, I advise you to mind your own business. You know him? Arbor turned to look at Duan Yu with an exasperated expression. Can't you throw a few concealed weapons and kill them? The pitiful Duan Yu nodded his head pitifully, looking like a sheep waiting to be slaughtered. They were sent by eldest brother. I can't kill every single one of them. I have to at least let a few of them go back to spread the news. Who would have thought that these people would not rest until he was dead? Wouldn't it be better to go back and report to them and leave them alive? It was really annoying that they had to chase him all the way. You're just too soft-hearted, the little fellow said seriously. Emolien and the others couldn't help but want to roll their eyes when they heard this hilarious conversation. How could he be so soft-hearted? Almost every batch of these assassins never made it back. Duan Yu couldn't resist blinking and swiftly suppressed his belly full of laughter. He nodded in full agreement and said, I just can't do it to my own people. Chapter 2760. What kind of people are you? Arbor irritably glared at him, before looking up at the group of black-clothed men, who were exchanging glances. Last chance scram. The leader of the black-clothed men couldn't help but be amused. He glared at Arbor with a venomous gaze. Duan Yu narrowed his eyes, and that frivolous smile on his face gradually turned cold. This group of reckless fools actually dared to look at Jojo with that kind of gaze. Since you don't want to scram, then all of you can stay here, Arbor said coldly. With a flick of his finger, countless talismans flew out. Once the 8 trigrams binding talismans were activated, countless rays of light landed on the black-clothed men. At the same time, Arbor threw out hundreds of 5-spirit talismans, forming a 5-spirit offensive talisman matrix. In an instant, it was as if a celestial maiden was scattering flowers. The earth and wood beneath the black-clothed men's feet rapidly rolled and tore at them, while fire and lightning interweaved above their heads. It was like the end of the world, when a torrent of water pounced over like a giant dragon and swallowed all the black-clothed men. Everyone only saw crackling bolts of lightning swiftly flowing through their limbs and bones. The lightning and water interweaved, electrifying those black-clothed men until they were charred on the outside and tender on the inside. Dell's group had long been dumbfounded. They were stupefied on the spot as they stared fixedly in that direction. The black-clothed men who were originally struggling and shouting were smashed down by the lightning bolts under the activation of the Thunder Spirit talismans. The leader of the black-clothed men had a slightly stronger physique. Although he wasn't killed, he was already battered and exhausted. He lay in the filthy water mixed with stinky mud, and could only feel the fatal lightning bolts above his head smashing down on his body, as if they were free. He was so tired that he almost wanted to close his eyes. Just let these lightning bolts smash him to death. He felt hopeless, and at the same time, he wanted nothing more than to curse incessantly in his heart. Fuck your young masters and misses. How were these the weak young masters and misses of patrician families? Weren't these fiends and devils? Right now, he suddenly felt that the stoic face's scram was simply like the sound of nature. Unfortunately, he didn't manage to grab hold of that scram tightly. Now he could only stay here and head to the Yellow Springs. When the last bolt of lightning fell, the entire forest quieted down. There were no more wails, no more cries, no more screams, and even the chirping of insects and birds could not be heard. The little stoic raised the several dozen talismans between her fingers and frowned. He's dead. As she spoke, she put away the remaining 5 spirit talismans. Her expression was indifferent, without the slightest fluctuation. Let's go. Della and the others felt a chill run down their spines. Many pairs of eyes looked at the young lady in front of them, as if they were looking at a monster. He didn't look very old, but his methods were so vicious. Moreover, the talismans in her hands were simply endless. This was truly a life-hastening talisman. The mercenary Dong Zi, who had been critical of their leader, was now pale with fright. He thought about what the old mercenary had said to him, and was glad that he didn't cause any trouble. Otherwise, the one lying in the dry grass and mud right now would be his corpse. Oh no, maybe they wouldn't even be able to find his corpse. The little mercenary involuntarily shuddered as he looked at the things that had been burned to ashes by the lightning bolts. Chapter 2761. As expected, the commander's principle of not causing trouble and being cautious was completely correct. You wouldn't know about those unknown dangers while roaming the pugilistic world. Perhaps a seemingly adorable little stoic girl was in existence that could take people's lives the moment she made a move. The little mercenary Dong Zi silently retreated and shrank into the group. Commander Dell was naturally very shocked on the inside. Right now, she was extremely glad that she didn't harbor enmity towards the little stoics group from the start. The little girl and her group weren't troublemakers. As long as the people in her group were sensible enough and didn't provoke them, naturally nothing would happen. Del exhaled and hastily turned around with the group. At this time, a scouting mercenary poked his head out from the forest and whispered something into Del's ear. Del's eyes brightened slightly, and she quickly nodded and left with her group. At the same time, Miss Chow heard the little water baby's excited voice in her mind. Master, 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 ahead, let's go ahead. I can smell the scent of natural water. Arbor was startled and communicated mentally. What's natural water? It's a type of 9-layered spirit water, the little water baby said excitedly. It hasn't been comprehended by anyone yet. Before that, Dian can devour it. After devouring it, Dian can probably enter the growth stage. The more the little water baby spoke, the more excited it became. It wished for nothing more than to immediately jump out of Paradise Planet. Arbor couldn't help but be speechless and immediately stopped it. You're not allowed to come out. I'll go take a look. Master, master. Natural water, natural water. Arbor rolled his eyes and tossed the little fellow's noisy cries to the back of his mind. He looked up and said to Emolien, Little water told me that there's a type of 9-layered spirit water ahead that's very useful to it. Let's go look for it. Okay. Emolien naturally didn't have any objections. Everyone didn't set up camp. Previously, they were sitting around a tree and barbecuing, so they moved very quickly now. After pouring a layer of ice water over the fire and putting it out, everyone casually picked up their bags and followed Miss Chow forward. With the little water baby's senses, there was naturally no problem with the direction. Not long after, the group arrived at the depths of the forest and stopped in their tracks. Duan Yu's figure drifted forward as he stared fixedly at the empty area before him. Before this, they could sense that Del's 100-man mercenary group was right in front of them. But the strange thing was, in just a few minutes, Del and the others suddenly disappeared. Everyone be careful. Emolien suddenly grabbed Arbor, who was beside her, and both of them moved slightly to the left, jumping away from a sudden vine attack. As for Lu Yu and Hua Tao, one of them summoned an earth wall, while the other released several water spirits to block the twisting vines. Suddenly, a fierce gust of wind rose from the center of the forest. It was like a broken pocket that had its bottom leaked, sucking everyone forward with a cold gust of wind. Qi Xianxian was caught off guard, and her entire body was swept up. Everyone was shocked, and without thinking, they reached out to grab her. Ma Ta grabbed Qi Xianxian's arm first, and was dragged several meters forward. Her feet slid through the forest's vegetation, leaving behind a trail of dirt. The little fatty pounced forward and hugged Qi Xianxian's waist. With his weight on top of hers, Qi Xianxian, who was originally being sucked forward, finally managed to stabilize herself. Chapter 2762. On the other side, Miss Chow was also pulled a few steps back by the strange suction force. Then, Emolien reached out and pressed her down on the ground. The strong wind suddenly blew, and the fallen leaves swept the ground. The sand was almost blinding. There was something in the middle of the forest. Arbor narrowed his eyes and threw out a blue talisman. He shouted, "Reveal yourself." The reveal talisman flashed and landed in the middle of the forest. Instantly, a shadow flashed in front of everyone's eyes, and a strange huge beast appeared. Wow, what a big fish. Little Fatty looked up against the strong wind and squinted his eyes. He couldn't help but exclaim. This was really an 8-legged strange fish that they had never seen before. Its fat belly was bulging, and it had 8 short legs. It had a big golden carp head. Its 2 eyeballs were rolled up like dead fish eyes, and it stared at them coldly. As soon as this lousy fish opened its mouth, a gust of wind rolled up the dead branches and withered leaves in front of it. It sucked in the sky and the earth as if it wanted to suck the whole world away. The trees were rolled up by the strange wind and were sucked into its big mouth. Qi Xuanxuan's face turned green. She opened her mouth and exclaimed, "Damn, is this strange fish eating?" "Xianxian, you know the truth." Little Fatty and the rest thought bitterly in their hearts. If this went on, when the strange fish sucked away all the flowers and plants around them, they would be the only fat fish left to be slaughtered. "Fight it!" Hua Tao roared, and released a water spirit from his hand. In a split second, the strong wind blew it away. It didn't even land on the fish. His movement seemed to have infuriated the big-headed fat carp. It breathed heavily, and the fierce wind sucked Hua Tao into its mouth. Damn! Little Fatty hurriedly reached out to grab Hua Tao's clothes. But how could he grab it in such a hurry? A ripping sound was heard. The corner of Hua Tao's shirt was torn off by the little fatty, but his body still flew uncontrollably towards the fat belly fish. Several people hurriedly stretched out their hands and shot out several streams of spiritual power, intending to slow down Hua Tao's body. But it was useless. The whirlwind released by this strange fish was too fierce. Under the tearing, it only made Hua Tao's outer clothes become riddled with holes, which was very funny. Emolian said, "This strange fish's attack power is probably average, but the strange wind it creates is very annoying. Jojo, you stay here. I'll go over and kill it." How could Jojo be willing to back down? He shook his head and said, "Let's go together." He let go of his hand and allowed himself to be sucked in by the strange wind. Emolian hurriedly followed after him. As soon as the two of them reached the mouth of the fish, they almost fainted from the stench. "What are you doing?" When Duanyu saw the two of them being sucked over, he quickly wanted to follow. Arbor pinched his nose and turned around to wave at him. He endured the overwhelming stench and shouted at him, "It stinks to death, don't come over." Did this big-headed carp not bathe in several hundred years? It was simply stinky to the heavens. When the strange fish saw two people being sucked over, it smugly opened its mouth and was about to bite them. In the blink of an eye, Arbor casually took out a rod-shaped spirit weapon from his inner world and erected it. Ah! The strange fish bit down with its sharp teeth, but its upper jaw was almost pierced through by this rod. It was in so much pain that it let out a human-like scream. Your ancestor is in so much pain. Where did this little scoundrel come from, to be so wicked? Its dead fish eyes had just revealed a vicious glint, when several of its teeth were pried out by the roots. Fish, I feel like I'm going to be in for a tragedy. Chapter 2763. Arbor used that rod to press against the fish's mouth, and swung the ferrule down twice, smashing the fish's row of sharp teeth into powder. The big-headed carp screeched as it crawled and rolled on the ground. It must be an unbearable pain. Seeing that it still dared to scream, Arbor took out a crowbar-like spirit weapon from his inner world and pulled out several teeth from the fish's lower body. The strange fish's two fins wobbled pitifully, and the entire fish sprawled on the ground as though it was dead. If it had hands, it would definitely be clutching its head and begging for mercy. Or even the crying kind Duanyu covered his nose and approached to take a look. His mouth involuntarily twitched. Heavens, Jojo, this child was savage and ruthless. She actually crippled this big-headed carp into this state. This pitiful fish was like a tiger that had its canine teeth pinched by a clamp now that it had lost its teeth. It was completely unable to display its might. Arbor stood in front of the fish's mouth, seemingly expressionless. Perhaps only Emolian knew that the little fellow was on the brink of a violent convulsion from the stench. The crown prince was amused, but could only stifle his laughter. He had no choice but to raise his hand to stroke the little fellow's fur. "Jojo, let's go out first." The two of them jumped out of the fish's mouth. Arbor immediately controlled the water to rinse that sticky ferrule 18 times before storing it in his conscious. He switched to a washboard, and without making a sound, he suddenly burst into action. Lady Qiao Qiao rushed to the front of the dead fish. Without saying a word, she swung her washboard and used all her might to beat that fellow to death. "Who told you not to bathe for several hundred years? Who told you to stink like this? Who told you to suffocate this darling to death? Who told you to act like this?" Everyone was instantly at a loss for words. Duanyu quickly reached out to stop Qi Xianxian and company, who wanted to help. "Let her beat it, let her beat it." The little fellow was currently extremely displeased. She had to vent it out. Qi Xianxian and the rest silently counted. When Lady Jojo thrashed that dead fish 58 times with the washboard, she stopped all her actions. "Vomit!" the little girl expressionlessly shouted. Everyone was speechless. She really wanted to laugh, even though she didn't understand what Jojo meant by vomit. However, The little girl's one word was like an order. The big-headed carp quickly opened its mouth and spat out something. When Xianxian saw this, she almost vomited too. This was so fucking disgusting. A pile of stinky acid gushed out. There were also countless human skulls, arm bones, and so on in this row of acid, piled up into a small hill. Then, the strange fish spat out piles of ores and piled them up neatly. God knows how many random things this guy had eaten in the past few hundred years. Hua Tao and the others followed suit, and vomited while washing the ores with spiritual water. Prince Emil looked at these things with disdain. He picked up a branch from the side and fiddled with the ores. He kept calling out to Hua Tao and Mata. Wash it here, wash it here, wash it clean. It's so disgusting. There's even mucus on it. Hurry and rinse it clean. This, wash away all its vomit. Prince Mo used the branch to pull out a fist-sized snow crystal, and his eyes brightened. He didn't expect this dead fish to have such good stuff in its stomach. Hua Tao and Mata felt a bit miserable. Their water spirit wasn't used to attack people. It was used to wash away the residue in the dead fish's stomach. After working for so long, it was really quite tiring. Chapter 2764. When the torment finally ended, Hua Tao wiped the sweat off his forehead and looked at Crown Prince Mo beside him. It's about time. Put it away. Prince Mo looked at the pile of ores that were washed clean and nodded reluctantly. Give me your weapons later and I'll reforge them. Hua Tao and the rest's eyes lit up. They happily replied, okay, and quickly helped the Crown Prince put away the ores. At the same time, the unlucky big-headed carp's vomiting was also coming to an end. The big-headed carp opened its mouth and spat out hundreds of people. It was as if they were taking a dump. The people who rolled out one after another had their faces covered in the weird fish's vomit. They looked at the glaring sunlight in front of them in confusion. Degree. What happened? Where were they? Why did their vision feel so blurry? Dai used her sleeve to wipe the vomit on her face. She stared at the disgusting mucus on her hand in disgust. She turned around to look at the 2-meter-tall weird fish behind her. She opened her mouth in shock. This. When did this weird fish get here? Actually, they didn't know what had happened at all. After Dai received the news from the mercenary scouts, she led a group of people to their destination. Halfway there, they suddenly felt a gust of wind. They didn't take any precautions, and were inexplicably sucked in by the suction force. With this suction, they all entered the big-headed carp's stomach. The big-headed carp didn't just spit out the 100 people from Dair's mercenary group. Other than that, there was also a group of people from Zhongli's residence. The second young mistress of Zhongli's family was screaming everywhere. She used her sleeve to wipe the vomit on her head. Her vision turned black and she almost fainted. Heavens, this is too disgusting. Looking at the sticky vomit all over her body and hands, Zhongli Jiwei screamed and grabbed a water spiritualist from her family. Quick! Wash it clean. Ah! Zhongli Jiwei stomped her feet on the spot. As for the young lady standing beside her, she walked to the side with a calm expression on her face. She quickly cleaned up the dirt on her body and changed into a slightly cleaner outer robe. Although she had not taken a bath, her body was still dirty. She frowned hard, but she did not scream like Zhongli Jiwei, as if the whole world was against her. Oh my god, what kind of nonsense is this? Ah, are these intestines? Ah, why was there such a disgusting thing hanging on her head? Zhongli Jiwei's vision turned black. Ever since she left the fish's stomach, the screams never stopped. Arbor felt a headache coming on. His eyes flashed fiercely as he roared. Shut up. The world suddenly quieted down, and everyone's eyes focused on her. Zhongli Jiwei stared at her in disbelief with a pile of vomit and screamed, You? Why are you here? Belatedly, she realized that Prince Mo was tidying up a pile of ores on the side. She couldn't help but exclaim, Your Highness? Without another word, Arbor raised the washboard in his hand and rushed over. Duan Yu couldn't stop her in time, even if he wanted to. Seeing this little fellow dashing in front of Zhongli Jiwei, his temper flared up, and he swung the washboard at Zhongli Jiwei's head. Everyone was speechless. Chapter 2765. Don't you understand human language when I told you to shut up? Arbor's head swelled with pain from this woman's yelling. Viciousness appeared in his eyes. And he didn't care what this woman was scolding and directly beat her to death. If he had known that this woman was also in the fish's stomach, he wouldn't have let the dead fish spit her out. Annoying. The scene was dead silent, and everyone shrank back in fear, trying to keep a distance from the Zhongli family's servants. What are you doing? A shocked cry came from the side. Shi Yongqian, who didn't manage to hitch a ride on the Qin estate's young master's air transportation spirit artifact, could only set off with the aristocratic families from the capital. She was originally full of anger, and now that she saw the young crown princess, she was even angrier. Actually, Shi Yongqian was only a 5th-level spiritual master, with a 5th-level spiritual fire cultivation. Based on cultivation, it was impossible for her to be accepted by the Imperial Academy. The strange thing was that the Imperial Academy accepted talents from all walks of life. For example, 5th young Master Qin, a good-for-nothing, was accepted because of his outstanding zither skills. And Shi Yongqian's specialty was smelting ores. Although she was relatively young, she had already become a very outstanding smelting master, and was one of the more outstanding talents in the entire Shi family. Arbor naturally knew that Shi Yongqian also had a smelting master identity. In her previous life, this woman had often flaunted this talent in front of her. But so what? Miss Qiao didn't need her to smelt ores or forge spirit artifacts. Her lotus knew everything, and with the sacred fire in hand, smelting anything was a piece of cake. There was no need to give this woman any face at all. Just as Shi Yongqian was reprimanding, Miss Qiao had already knocked Zhongli Jiwei unconscious. Hearing the sound, she leisurely stopped and turned to look at Shi Yongqian. Do you also want a few hits? You. Shi Yongqian had a sullen feeling like a scholar meeting a soldier, unable to reason clearly. You want to reason with the crown princess, right? She punched you. How could you explain clearly? Shut up. Arbor angrily rebuked. So long-winded and full of nonsense. If I had known, I would have let you all die in the fish's stomach. How could she have known that in this dead fish's stomach, apart from Dell's group, there were still so many useless people? As the saying goes, money can't buy anything. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have saved him. At this time, a young lady who was originally standing next to Zhongli Jiwei and had walked to the side to silently tidy her clothes walked back. She nimbly cupped her fists and bowed to Qiao Mu and the others. Many thanks to the Crown Prince Consort for lending a hand. Who are you? Arbor glanced at the girl and saw that her eyebrows were not bad. She had a long face and eyes that were as bright as water. The girl smiled in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. My name is Zhongli Ziyi. Just now, my younger sister yelled and screamed in front of the Crown Princess. It was her fault. I apologize to you. You are you, she is she. What he meant was, you don't need to apologize to me for her rudeness. She had always been a person who could clearly distinguish between kindness and hatred. She could clearly distinguish who was right and who was wrong. Arbor glanced at her indifferently, then turned and walked to Emolien's side. On this side, Crown Prince Emo was almost done cleaning up that pile of ores. He had Hua Tao and Ma Ta rinse off some of the ore crystals at the bottom, revealing a jade-like object. When Emolien saw this object, her eyes lit up. Heavenly water mithril, Shi Yongqian exclaimed. Chapter 2766. At the same time, a hand reached out from the side and abruptly snatched that piece of pitch-black heavenly water mithril. The newcomer was a man around 30 years old. His appearance was very mediocre, and his rat-like eyes emitted a shrewd light, as if they were perpetually squinted. He held that piece of heavenly water mithril in his hand, and couldn't resist shrieking in excitement. Heavenly water mithril, it's heavenly water mithril, ha 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 ha. I didn't expect that I could pick up a piece of heavenly water mithril in my lifetime. What are you doing? Hua Tao and the others glared angrily at that person and berated. Put it down. This person was also a mercenary that had rolled out of the fish's stomach just now. However, he didn't look like a member of Dire mercenary group. As expected, Dyer frowned and said to the rat-eyed man in the next second, Deputy Commander Cheong, isn't it unkind of you to do this? All of us were rescued by these brothers. How can you be like this? Not only do you not repay them, but you also snatch their things. That man narrowed his rat-like eyes and sneered. It's useless even if you scream at the heavens when you pick up a treasure from the ground. At this time, Mo Lien had already put away the remaining items and walked to Miss Chiao's side. She glanced at her with an aggrieved expression. It was snatched. I wanted to use heavenly water mithril to forge a weapon for Hua Tao and Ma Ta. When Arbor heard that his companion's weapons were snatched, his gaze immediately turned unfriendly, and he glared coldly at that short-sighted man. Who are you? Big Brother Cheong. Shi Yongqian had already walked over in high spirits. Is Uncle Shirlang here? Niece Yongqian. A laugh came from behind, and Shirlang Mercenary Group's commander walked over. He had already finished cleaning up, and was hiding behind a tree to change out of all his clothes. Compared to Zhongli Zi, who only changed her outerwear, his body was naturally much more refreshed. When Qiong Hao saw Shi Yongqian, he was like a mouse seeing rice. His rat-like eyes widened slightly as he beamed. Younger sister Yongqian. Earlier, he was completely focused on this heavenly water mithril, and didn't even have time to snatch things. So how could he have noticed Shi Yongqian? Now that he saw the goddess in his heart, he was naturally very happy. However, the little stoic's cold words were like a basin of cold water that drenched him from head to toe. Put down the thing in your hand or die. Shirlang frowned, and the mercenaries behind him shouted in dissatisfaction. Miss, you're being too overbearing. That's right. You guys have already picked up so many ores. What's wrong with giving one to someone else? If it were anyone else, they might have given the items to them out of shame. However, the little stoic was expressionless and only asked coldly, Are you handing it over or not? Qiong Hao's eyes flashed with anger. Just as he was about to speak, he saw Shi Yongqian tugging at his sleeve. This is the Crown Prince of Shenzhou, and the Crown Princess. Qiong Hao's pupils constricted. Due to the other party's identity, he didn't dare to act rashly. Although the Shirlang mercenary group was backed by the Shi family, and had become a famous fifth-level mercenary group on the Divine Land, they could not afford to offend the Crown Prince of the Divine Land, as long as they were in the Divine Land. On the side, Shirlang was already a bit cowardly, and he hastily apologized with a smile. Crown Princess, please don't be angry, haha. Qiong Hao is a blacksmith master. He was just haha, excited to see the heavenly water mithril, and didn't have any other intentions. Chapter 2767. Although Qiong Hao was a bit unwilling, he truly didn't dare to contradict the Crown Prince and Crown Princess, so he could only reluctantly toss the heavenly fire mithril in his hand to Arbor. The little stoic glanced at them coldly, and caught the heavenly fire mithril he tossed over. She said neutrally, If someone else saved my life, not only would I not snatch their things, I would also properly repay them. In other words, you bunch of cowards are truly disgusting to the extreme. Although she didn't ask for repayment for saving people, it truly disgusted her to the core that they repaid her by snatching things. Qiong Hao was momentarily at a loss for words. However, Zhongli Jiwei had already woken up and couldn't resist shouting in an impassioned tone. I don't think you intentionally wanted to save us. Aren't you just saving us in passing? Why? Zhongli Zi, why are you gagging me? Apologies. Zhongli Zi turned around and nodded apologetically at Arbor's group. She then said to Zhongli Jiwei, Can you stop yelling? Go behind the tree and clean yourself up. I'll keep an eye on you. Zhongli Jiwei looked at the mess of vomit on her body and screamed. Ah! She hastily hid behind the tree to clean herself up. Arbor couldn't be bothered with them anymore. She tugged at Prince Mo and said to Duan Yu and the others, Let's go. When she arrived in front of that half-dead strange fish, she kicked it hard. Why aren't you scramming yet? Was it waiting to be slaughtered and put into a pot? The dead fish pitifully swayed its body and shrunk before hastily turning to flee. Its back looked a bit disheveled in the wind. Wasn't that so? Heaven took pity on it and threw up all the good stuff it had eaten for several hundred years. Not only was the strange fish hungry now, but its entire fat belly also deflated. Wait! Don't go! Zhongli Jiwei scuttled out from behind the tree and shouted, You! How could you let it escape? What else are you going to do? Kill it! Zhongli Jiwei roared angrily. Who knows how many people this guy has eaten while squatting here? You're really what a lunatic! How could he let it escape? So what if I eat people? Xiaomu gazed at her icily. Well, what? Zhongli Jiwei widened her eyes in shock, as if she was looking at a monster. She stared straight at Arbor. The little stoic coldly swept her a glance. Other people are eating normally. Who told you to trespass on its territory? What a weird argument. Did the young crown prince consort mean that the strange fish was quite innocent? Was it because these idiots had barged in and disturbed the strange fish's normal feeding? Zhongli Jiwei's eyes widened in disbelief. She stared at her blankly for a long while before she couldn't help but scream. You can't let it go. Then go chase after them and kill them. What are you stopping me for, chirping and shrieking for? Xiaomu brusquely swept this brain-dead woman a glance. Zhongli Jiwei looked back, but she couldn't see the strange fish anymore. That strange fish originally possessed innate concealment skills. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to secretly swallow so many people at once. The main reason was that this strange fish knew how to conceal itself. In addition, it concealed itself and used the gale to attract people. So many people were foolishly tricked. In terms of actual combat strength, it was actually only at the normal level. If Arbor knew clearly, this strange fish should be a life-bound beast born with water. Chapter 2768. In fact, it was quite innocent. Arbor was right. In fact, this strange fish was very lazy. It had been squatting here for hundreds of years, eating, sleeping, and eating. It had not moved at all. If it wasn't for someone coming for the natural water, it would be impossible to walk into its sphere of influence and be sucked into its stomach. Now that it had disappeared in front of their eyes, as long as it hid on its own, they would never be able to find it in this lifetime. Zhongli Jiwei was so angry that she almost fainted. She pointed at the little crown princess with a trembling finger and said the word, "You," repeatedly, but she couldn't say anything else. Arbor glanced at her coldly. You don't want your finger anymore, do you? Zhongli Jiwei suddenly retracted her hand. She didn't realize that immediately retracting her hand was actually an instinctive physical reaction under her fear. She saw that this young crown prince consort's body and soul were screaming the word tremble. Get lost. Eating was an animal's instinct, so there was nothing wrong with it. Since it had spat out everything it had eaten, for Miss Qiao, this matter was considered settled. Whoever wanted to be righteous could continue to pursue the matter if they wanted to. She couldn't be bothered with these trivial matters. Zhongli Jiwei's body trembled, and she hurriedly took 2 steps back. Zhongli Zi quickly held her back and shook her head helplessly. Madame Ma's daughter was arrogant and useless. She only knew how to make a fuss all day long. Not to mention that the crown princess hated her. Even her sister, who had been with her for 20 years, couldn't stand her bad temper. Arbor didn't care about them at all. He pulled Emolien and called for his own people, and they went through the overgrown trees. Their eyes lit up slightly. Outside was a gloomy forest with towering ancient trees. Inside was an open space of less than 30 square meters. In the middle was a small pond, surrounded by lush herbs. At a glance, it was colorful and green. It was exceptionally beautiful. Master Silver, in front, in front. Dian Dian shouted excitedly. Xiaomu knew that the natural water was right in front of her, so she hastily dashed forward. Arriving in front of that small puddle, he saw a beautiful pink flower plant growing in the water. In the middle of the lustrous petals, there was a drop of sparkling water. It rolled around the petals against the breeze, but it did not fall. Goody! The water child swiftly squirmed out from between Xiaomu's fingers, and it excitedly sucked in that water droplet with its mouth open. Swoosh! The natural water seemed to tremble, but under the powerful pressure of the holy water, it was sucked over without any resistance. It quickly merged with the water baby's transparent arm. The moment the light burst out, Arbor quickly took the water child into Paradise Planet. The pink plants in the puddle were dying at a speed visible to the naked eye. Arbor's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly dug the plant out of the water and threw it into Paradise Planet. Ball, save it. Leave it to me, master. Qiu immediately responded. At the same time, Shi Yongqian and the others, who were blocked outside by Mata and Huatao, finally broke through the barrier and rushed in. They all exclaimed at once. Wow, so many herbs. Everyone scrambled to dig and shovel the plants around the puddle. They looked like a group of bandits entering a village. Their movements were so crude that Arbor's eyelids kept twitching. You guys. Qi Xianxian wanted to stop them, but Arbor raised his hand and stopped her. She had all these plants on Paradise Planet, so there was no need to fight over them. It was just a pity. Chapter 2769. After this herb field was excavated by these bandits in such a barbaric manner, the roots and soil were damaged. Not a single blade of grass would grow here in the future, and nothing would grow here anymore. What a pity for such a small spiritual land. This water, could it be spiritual water? A mercenary exclaimed softly. The group of people immediately threw away the herbs and swarmed toward the small pond, taking out bamboo tubes and other items to get water. A mercenary from the Dire mercenary group bent down to taste the water and immediately exclaimed, "It really is spiritual water." Could it be that one of the 5 spirit origins, a high-level spiritual water, existed here? This puddle didn't look like it was formed in just a few years. It must have been formed by droplets of water vapor that filled this small puddle. From this, it could be seen that there was definitely a treasure here. Everyone glanced at Arbor suspiciously. After all, it was this little crown princess who had led people here first. If there was a water spirit origin, it would naturally have been taken by the little crown princess first. Some people were impatient and hurriedly jumped into the pond, searching for something in the mud. Arbor couldn't help but be speechless. She only stood to the side and didn't say anything. Looking at the plants that had been trampled by those people running back and forth, she felt a little pity. Unexpectedly, Arbor was a little absent-minded as she thought of her previous life. The paradise that had appeared on Hulun Mountain in Kwoto Village had also been ruined like this. Fortunately, the paradise had been safely hidden away by her and was far away from the chaos of the world. It would never become a barren land again. When everyone rushed into the shallow pond, Qi Xianxian and the others didn't idle around either. They dug out some undamaged herbs nearby. However, no matter how fast the 7 of them dug, they couldn't compare to those boorish people. More than 100 people were squeezed into a small area of 30 square meters. Everyone was fighting to get to the bottom of the pond to fish out some good stuff. At this moment, suddenly, a faint soft light shone from the bottom of the pond. A light green plant with 7 leaves leaped out of the pond and hastily flew toward Xiao Mu like it was fleeing for its life. One after another, a lot of colorful plants ran straight towards the little guy as if they were psychic. Everyone turned around dumbfounded. That stoic face stood expressionlessly far away and didn't approach the edge of the puddle. However, the strange thing was that the vegetation at the bottom of the puddle turned into specks of flowing light and kept running toward her. This scene was simply amazing. Emolien Duanyu and the others all looked unperturbed. How could he not be calm? Jojo had the holy wood on him, so why would he need to rush forward and snatch it away like the others? She only had to stand there and let Qiu give the order, and those divine herbs that had already gained sentience would naturally rush to her side. The wood spirit origin in her body was no joke. It was not a joke to say that plants had spirits. Those spirit herbs that had lived in this world for more than several hundred years weren't fools. Could it be that they would abandon their little master, who possessed the holy wood spirit origin, and follow a bunch of people who didn't understand medicine at all, and looked at them like they were looking at piles of spirit coins? It was simply a reckless waste of God's good gifts. The group of young men from the Adele mercenary group were all dumbfounded. Who knew what was going on? Could it be that even plants knew what was good and bad these days, and could even choose to follow their master? Chapter 2770. Zhongli Jiwei's heart was about to explode from anger when she saw this scene. She simply couldn't believe that even those naturally occurring plants actually knew how to curry favor with the rich and powerful, and attach themselves to the rich and powerful. She felt more comfortable thinking this way. Otherwise, she simply couldn't explain why those plants would look down on them and insist on sticking to the crown princess. Although Zhongli Zi was also quite shocked, she wasn't like Zhongli Jiwei, whose entire face was contorted from jealousy. Zhongli Zi also didn't swarm over to that small pond, and couldn't be bothered to fight over that bit of spirit water with others. There were more than 100 of them, and that pond of water was only enough for each person to drink a mouthful. It felt very strange to expend so much effort to snatch that mouthful of water. Shi Lang and Xiong Hao went to fill bamboo tubes with water, but they didn't manage to fill much, and nearly got into a fight with Dai Er's mercenary group instead. Although Shi Lang was leading a 5th-ranked mercenary group, the people he brought were far inferior to Dai Er's mercenary group. If the two sides fought now, Shi Lang's group would definitely suffer. However, no one was willing to give up this spirit water that was so easily obtainable. Both mercenary groups were unwilling to give way, so the situation was a bit deadlocked. On the other side, Qiu calmed down after summoning the wind and summoning the rain, and making the dozens of divine rank and above herbs hidden in the pond submit to it. Emolian, Duanyu, and the others were secretly amused when they carefully examined the little girl's expression. Although this little fellow didn't have any expression on her face, those familiar with her could tell that the little girl was currently very happy. However, no clues could be discerned from the stoic face. Shi Yongqian, who had been observing the little stoic from the side, couldn't help but say with a cold expression, "Before we barged in, this place seemed to be emitting a strange light." Shi Lang's heart jolted when he heard that, and his greedy eyes roamed over the little crown princess. He chuckled mischievously and said, "The crown princess was the first person to enter this area just now." When he said that, the others would definitely unite against a common enemy and become suspicious of Arbor. Xiao Mu had already had Qiu put away the several dozen stalks of divine rank herbs. Upon hearing this, she looked up and scoffed at Shi Lang. "Just say what you want to say. Don't beat around the bush." Shi Lang's wrinkled face twitched slightly. "I'm sure the Dire mercenary group knows about this. We have accepted a mysterious mission to search for natural water." Dai and Suha glanced at the old man and didn't say anything. Seeing that no one responded to him, Shi Lang's face darkened. "Dai, you guys are quite patient." The beautiful woman couldn't help but sneer. She simply crossed her arms and looked at him indifferently. "Shi Lang, you old fox, there's no need to provoke me with words. I'm not some inexperienced person. Your words of sowing discord, save them for later." Shi Lang chuckled, his eyes revealing a bit of anger. "This place is so hidden, and there's a strange fish in front of us guarding it. I don't believe you won't be suspicious. That strange fish must be a water-type life-bound beast. Natural water, 9th level spirit water." That destitute vice-commander beside Shi Lang immediately squinted his rat eyes into slits. His gaze scrutinized Xiao Mu's body back and forth, as if he wanted to see through her body and ascertain whether or not there was natural water in her body. Chapter 2771. Xiong Hao was a level 12 great spiritualist, and controlled the 5th level of the water spirit. The natural water was more useful to him than anyone else. If he could obtain the natural water, he could comprehend it again. If he could comprehend a higher level of origin energy, he could make the 9th level spirit water replace the 5th level spirit water that he comprehended previously. In this way, his cultivation would definitely increase by 1 or 2 levels. Moreover, the effects of the 9th level spirit water and the 5th level spirit water in battle were naturally different. Even if they were both water spirits, the 5th level spirit water would have to submit to the 6th level spirit water, not to mention the 9th level spirit water. Of course, if he obtained the 9th level spirit water, his body would not be able to comprehend it. In that case, he could only hand over the 9th level spirit water to complete this secret mission. Anyway, no matter how bad it was, he would still be able to obtain abundant mission resources. But now, He didn't even see a single strand of the 9th-level spirit water. According to his goddess Shi Yongqian, the 9th-level spirit water should have been taken away by this stoic face in front of him. Xianghao swept a glance at Arbor without batting an eyelid, then turned his gaze to the two youths beside her whose cultivation he couldn't tell. These two youths didn't look like easy targets. However, the temptation of the 9th-level spirit water was too great. Even though Xianghao felt that he might not be able to defeat the two youths in front of him, he couldn't resist the temptation of the 9th-level spirit water. He couldn't help but say bluntly, "This is the crown princess, right? You were the one who put away the natural water just now." Xianghao's attitude was somewhat disrespectful. After all, he was a level 12 great spiritualist. When facing a mere level 3 little spiritualist, he didn't need to be too courteous. He could just ask whatever he wanted. Even if the other party was the crown princess of China, with his cultivation, he could completely crush her. Naturally, he didn't need to pay too much attention to what he said. Arbor naturally knew Xianghao's mentality. Because of the aura-concealing talisman, she was only a mere level 3 little spiritualist in the eyes of others. In Arbor's group, other than the two youths whose cultivation she couldn't tell, the others were all level 8 spiritualists and above. She was the only hilarious level 3 little spiritualist. Perhaps in the eyes of Xianghao and the others, Miss Chiao was just an extra in this group. It must have been Arbor's teammates who pulled them out of the monster fish's stomach. Xianghao's attitude was disrespectful, but Arbor didn't care. He glanced at him coldly and said coldly, "So what if you took it? So what if you didn't?" Xianghao didn't think that a mere level 3 spirit master would dare to speak like this in front of him. He couldn't help but look angry as he said, "If you took it, then spit it out. If you didn't take it, then prove to us that you don't have the 9th layer spirit water." Arbor chuckled. Qi Xianxian and the others couldn't help but twitch their eyebrows. Their little girl was a little angry. However, Xianghao and the others who were courting death did not know that. They continued to run wildly on the road of death. "Come here, I'll spit it out for you." Arbor narrowed his eyes and curled his finger at Xianghao. Xianghao glanced at her suspiciously, then looked behind her at the group of teammates who hadn't done anything. He couldn't help but sigh in relief. It seemed that his prediction was right. This little girl with a low cultivation level must be this group's escort. Chapter 2772. It didn't matter if she was there or not, so her teammates probably couldn't be bothered to care about her. Xianghao's gaze was somewhat disdainful. He actually gathered his courage and took a step forward, looking coldly at Arbor. "Where's the stuff?" An icicle suddenly shot towards his face. In the blink of an eye, Xianghao's expression froze as he hurriedly dodged to the side. His entire body flashed to the side in a panic as he formed a defensive circle with one hand. With a soft bang, the defensive layer in front of him was penetrated by the icicle in a matter of minutes. The sharp icicle arrived in front of his eyes with a whoosh, less than an inch away from his forehead. If it came any closer, his forehead would be completely pierced through by the icicle. Xianghao looked at the icicle that was inches away from him in shock. He took a deep breath and didn't dare to move his body. He froze on the spot. "Big brother Qiong!" Shi Yongqian cried out in alarm as she hastily flew to Qionghao's side. She reached out to support his arm before turning to shout at Xiao Mu. "Crown Prince Consort, Big brother Qiong merely offended you with his words. Why did you have to be so ruthless? Hand over all the herbs you collected in the great forest of the north," Arbor said coldly. "Take out everything in your inner world, until you prove that you don't have a single herb on you. If you have even one herb hair, I'll kill you." Arbor's fingers moved slightly, and the icicle in front of Qianghao moved a little closer. It was now completely close to Qianghao's forehead. The eerie coldness caused him to feel a piercing pain on his forehead. A smear of blood slowly flowed down from his forehead as the coldness seeped in. Dai and the others couldn't help but smirk mockingly. They already knew that the little girl's methods were extraordinary. Her talisman could kill dozens of men in black in one go, much less a mere Qianghao. Dai's mercenary band and Shirlang's group had never been on good terms. Naturally, no one would specially remind Shirlang and Xiong that the little girl was not to be trifled with. Seeing this scene, Dell and the others were even secretly laughing at this poor vice commander. He thought that the other party was a rank 3 spirit master, and thought that he could crush the other party, but in the end, he was crushed like a dog. Xiong wanted to retreat, but he felt a force binding him. His body could not move at all. At this point, he clearly understood that he had kicked an iron plate. He couldn't help but force a smile as he spoke to Emolian. Your Highness Crown Prince, it's understandable that you want to help the Crown Princess. But it's not good to secretly make a move like this. Even now, Xiong still felt that the reason why he was so unlucky, unable to move his body and being restrained by the little Crown Princess so quickly, was definitely because of the Crown Prince, whose cultivation he couldn't see through, intervened. Prince Mo and Duanyu disdainfully looked at Xiong as if they were looking at an idiot. Would Miss Qiao need help from others? Stop joking, okay? They weren't so idle as to restrain a level 12 spirit master. This person had traveled outside for so many years, but he actually only talked about cultivation realm. Wasn't this a joke? He deserved to be so unlucky as to kick an iron plate. Enough nonsense. Arbor didn't need to explain. He drew a circle with his hand and icily said, "Are you handing it over or not? If you aren't, then die." You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.